To start off with, we start off with item number 1, which is hearing and possible action on Logjam Presents and Kettle House Brewery request for variance from Health Code Regulation 1, wastewater treatment and disposal system. And Jim Urban, I believe, is going to guide us through the discussion on that.
Comparatively,
It's good to see you every day this week.
I know.
Okay, hi everybody. I'm Jim Urban. I'm with the Health Department. I'm an environmental health specialist. So just before I start, I just wanted to point out it was kind of hard to tease out the relevant information. I want you guys to have a really good understanding of what the request is and what the background is here. So in the interest of time, I'm going to move kind of quickly through this, and I apologize. You know, if you have questions at the end, I welcome them. So essentially, the variance request that we're dealing with today is for the Kettle House Amphitheater. The applicants are Logjam Presents in conjunction with the owner of the property, K3 LLC, which is also known as the company owning the Kettle House Brewery. So the request is to use chemical toilets as the approved toilet facilities for the 2018 operating season at the amphitheater, rather than install permanent bathrooms out there. Why they need a variance to do this is because Regulation 1 requires that permanent structures be served by approved toilet facilities. It goes on to state that chemical toilets, also known as porta potties, right, can't be used to serve as those permanent sewer systems for structures. Just to point out as well, the amphitheater does meet the definition of a structure as is defined in Reg 1. The Regulation 1 is the local portion of the health code that deals with wastewater treatment and disposal. Its purpose is to both protect groundwater from being contaminated by wastewater and ultimately to protect public health by eliminating public contact with wastewater. This chemical toilet prohibition has been in place for a long time, and it's originally was incorporated into Reg 1 in 1994 to state that chemical toilets can't be used as the permanent bathroom facilities for a structure. And the reason is because, chemical toilets, they require a higher degree of maintenance and inspection to make sure that they're sealed and working properly. They require frequent pumping and servicing, which can come at a cost that can at times become financially unmanageable. Ultimately, they're just inferior to permanent bathroom facilities because there's a higher likelihood of exposure, that could result if you have tippage or things like that if they're not being maintained properly. And the other thing is that they are transportable, so there's not necessarily a guarantee that they're going to be on site at all times when there's somebody there needing to use them. I won't go through piece by piece with the timeline, but the board, I wanted to point out the board, of course, did grant a variance for the same, very similar request last year to use chemical toilets, and that expired the end of last year. Obviously we got a variance application from the applicants, and a number of things happened before today as required by the health code. Briefly, a history, a breakdown of the parcel. Like I said, it is owned. There's 2 tracks here. They're owned by the Kettle House Brewing Company, K3 LLC. However, the amphitheater improvements are owned by Logjam Presents.
Can I ask a historical clarification question?
Yes, sir.
Why was the variance originally issued for the site?
So originally, the applicants didn't realize that they would need permanent bathroom facilities. They thought that they could operate with chemical toilets. Once the amphitheater, construction sort of came to be, they were told by the health department that that wasn't going to meet the code, and so they didn't have plans in place or time even before operating season to gain the proper approvals and install the infrastructure for permanent facilities.
Okay.
So the board heard that variance last year.
Perfect, thank you.
You're welcome. So yeah, the amphitheater and the associated wastewater and water supply systems are owned by Logjam Presents. The amphitheater and the existing brewery are located on parcel 27A, which is larger. It's 14 acres roughly. And there are wastewater, there's a septic system associated with the amphitheater currently, but I'll get into what that serves in a little more detail later. So here's where the brewery and the amphitheater are located. This aerial doesn't show the buildings because it's a little bit outdated. You can see the footprint for the brewery here. It's along the Blackfoot River, located, just a little bit east of the town of Bonner. And this is the parcel where the drain field and public water supply well live. Back to the history, the tracks, they existed, but the boundaries were modified in 2015 through a boundary line relocation. So the state laws on subdivision as it pertains to sanitation review are relevant to this project. So I'm just going to go through a really quick kind of 101 of how the subdivision regulations play into this. So Title 76.4 regulates sanitation in subdivisions. It defines a subdivision, and it's noteworthy to point out that the boundary line relocation in 2015 was subject to this review requirement. So anything that's subject to the review requirements of this law either has to be reviewed or exempted under the law for the sanitary infrastructure, namely the water supply, the wastewater treatment and disposal, stormwater infrastructure to prevent flooding, and the garbage disposal plans. So as a result of this review, if everything meets the applicable rules and whatnot, the resulting approval document is known as a Certificate of Sanitation Approval. It's commonly referred to as a COSA. And what the COSA does is it clearly defines the health department's local authority to permit wells and septics and approve land use. So that's relevant because in 2015, back to the parcel history, there was a COSA issued for these tracks. And what it allowed was the brewery and the associated wastewater systems and water supplies that went along with that. In 2017, last year during the operating season, the amphitheater did go through a rewrite of that 2015 COSA to modify it a little bit and allow for the concession facilities at the amphitheater and also what's referred to as the green room, which is just a gathering space for the performers. What ended up getting approved as this in this COSA rewrite was a drain field and a water supply to serve the concessions and the green room. But what wasn't part of that review and that approval was the permanent bathrooms. And the reason for that was the designs didn't get to a point where it was able to move forward in a way that they would get their approvals. They had their variance in place at the time, so it didn't get wrapped into this COSA review. So that's still an outstanding thing that needs to happen before permanent bathrooms can be permitted locally for this facility. Like I said, septic systems were permitted and installed to serve the concessions in the green room. State law says that a person can't construct or use a facility that deviates from the COSA conditions until that's reviewed by the reviewing authority. Basically meaning that, like I said, the COSA is going to have to get rewritten again at the state level in order to allow us to permit a permanent bathroom facility served by a wastewater system. The applicants have proposed to pursue that COSA rewrite prior to the 2019 operating season. We haven't seen or reviewed plans for this yet as part of this variance application, so that's something that is pending. Just wanted to point that out so the board's aware. Here's the current site conditions. I won't take too much time explaining them, but I want you all to understand, we've got the brewery out here. with the associated industrial wastewater treatment system here to treat the brewery wastewater. There's a tap room associated with the brewery as well, and there's a drain field out here to serve the wastewater generated by that tap room. So here we have the amphitheater and the existing concession stands, which are served also by the public water supply as wells here located on this parcel. The wastewater from the concessions operations goes to this existing permitted drain field here. So those are the existing conditions. I have a few pictures of the amphitheater just so if you haven't seen it, just to kind of have a feel for what's going on out there. This was, I think, during the construction season last year. This was an event held. You can see, obviously, it's along the Blackfoot River there in the corridor. Down in the lower left of this photo is the brewery, and of course the amphitheater on the right. The 2017 operating season, for all intents and purposes, the health department has no indication that any of the previously approved variance criteria were not complied with. We didn't receive any complaints regarding the use or the conditions of the chemical toilets. However, we did have food service inspectors note food service violations when we were out there doing our inspections. And the primary violations that were noted were food being held out of temperature. So what the applicant has proposed this year as part of the variance application is to make upgrades to the food service facilities and the operations to improve the food handling out there. And they've already applied for the necessary permits and approvals, both with DEQ and locally with the health department to gain approval for that. Those things are still under review, but they've taken steps towards making improvements in that arena. Here's what they've proposed facility-wise. We have the existing concessions building here. They've proposed an addition to that that's going to look something like this. It's going to have a walk-in cooler, walk-in freezer. It'll allow them to keep food at proper temperatures during events, and something they had a little bit of a harder time with last year. So the health code defines the necessary criteria for the board to grant a variance. I'm going to go through these quickly one by one and just detail how the applicants have addressed each of these. So the first is that the variance has to be necessary to address extraordinary conditions that the applicant could not have reasonably prevented. The applicants state that they feel it is of greater public health benefit to invest in the upgrades to the concessions and the food service operations rather than invest this year in the permanent bathroom facilities. Namely because limited funding is available to make improvements to both during this operating season. The applicants believe that this variance is necessary to allow for a little bit more time to properly determine the appropriate fixture count and also the ideal location of the wastewater facilities so that they're designed and located in the most ideal way. The second condition that has to be met is compliance with the requirement from which the variance is requested would result in undue hardship to the applicant. So obviously if this variance is not approved, the venue won't have an option to operate legally in compliance with Regulation 1 for 2018 season without installing permanent bathroom facilities. So the applicant has stated that requiring them to install permanent bathrooms in 2018, again, could result in poor design and having to redo that.
I have a question. Do they know how many attendees are scheduled for this season to understand the economic impact of this facility being shut down?
I'm sure they'll tell us that when we talk.
Yeah, well, the venue supports up to 4,000 occupancy. I don't know how many events are booked. I'll let them speak to that, but.
Thank you.
I can just address, when you're done, I can address my question if that works.
Perfect.
So third condition, no alternatives that comply with the requirements are reasonably feasible. The only other option that would comply with Reg 1 is to install permanent bathroom facilities. There's no city sewer system out here, there's no centralized treatment, so it would involve gaining approvals for on-site facilities. The fourth condition, the variance requested is not more than the minimum needed to address the extraordinary condition. And the applicants aren't asking for anything more than just the use of chemical toilets, so granting the variance that they've come forth with, the request they've come forth with, won't allow them any other deviations from Regulation 1 or any other applicable regs. Fifth criteria is the environmental and public health concerns with granting variances. I'm going to go through these real quick one by one. Granting the variance, the board has to find that granting the variance won't contaminate any actual or potential drinking water supply. They've asserted that the chemical toilets will contain wastewater generated at the amphitheater. There won't be any leakage, and that they'll be located at least 100 feet from the existing public water supply wells. Obviously, the contents of the toilets will be pumped by a certified provider and disposed of in an approved site. Most commonly, the Missoula City wastewater treatment plant. The variance request can't cause a public health hazard as a result of access to insects, rodents, or other possible carriers of disease. The chemical toilets will have self-closing doors and air vents. They'll be screened to prevent access by flying insects. So we don't expect a problem there. We didn't observe any problems there last year. Cause a public health hazard by being accessible to persons or animals. The toilets are proposed to be stored in a fenced area with a lockable gate, so access to persons or animals would be minimized by that protective measure. And then employees will ensure that no unauthorized persons or animals will have access to the toilets. The variance can't violate any law or regulation governing water pollution or wastewater treatment and disposal, except for the rule that the variance is requested from. So this variance, like I said, won't deviate from any other requirements there. It can't cause pollution or contamination of state waters in violation of state law. So all contents of the chemical toilets are proposed to be disposed of in an approved facility and fashion. No contents of the toilets will be disposed of on-site during the duration of this variance, so we wouldn't expect any issues there as long as all the conditions are adhered to. The toilets can't cause a nuisance due to odor, unsightly appearance, or other aesthetic considerations. Again, they'll be pumped, there'll be deodorizers in the toilets themselves, and they'll be placed in a strategic location so that they're not causing an issue there. There's a section that talks about restrictions on the variance, and it says, the board shall not approve a variance if the applicant's proposal will adversely affect the health, safety, or welfare of any individual or cause adverse environmental impact greater than what would commonly be permitted by the code. And so we've taken a look at this, and given everything that we've discussed up to this point, there's no expected adverse impacts that would be beyond what a permanent facility would pose. The health department, we've taken a look and considered, as we did last year, what they're proposing, and we do feel that making upgrades to the food service facilities is going to be a great improvement in what they've got going on out there in terms of public health. We don't see an issue with the board granting this variance this year. We are asking the applicant to agree to some conditions, and I'll go through those briefly as we've indicated in the staff report. The first one is that we'd like to see the applicant apply for the COSA rewrite by September 1st of this year. And that's just to ensure that adequate time is provided to get through that review and get the necessary approvals so that they can move to the next step, which is local permitting and construction of the wastewater facilities for the permanent bathrooms. Of course, the chemical toilets must be available whenever the venue is occupied, not just during events, but even in between events, so that staff, anyone on site has somewhere that they can use the facility or the chemical toilets.
I have a question on permitting timeline. I don't understand the process completely enough to know, but if they submit by September 1st, could they have construction complete by the 2019 operating season? Is that enough time to get the bathroom facilities constructed?
I would say yes to that. So the coastal rewrite process typically is 3 to 6 months. I mean, it obviously varies quite a bit depending on the proposal. The permitting process is generally about a week.
Okay, perfect.
So then the construction end of things, you know, I'll let the applicant speak to that, but I would say yes, that would allow them time to do that.
Perfect, thank you.
The toilets must be maintained in a sanitary fashion. They must be rented from a supplier licensed by DEQ. They must be of sturdy construction to assure that no leakage of wastewater occurs. Doors must be self-closing, and the other openings must be screened to exclude vectors such as insects or pests. Chemical toilets must be located at least 100 feet away from any wells or surface water. That is what they're proposing. They must be secured behind a fence or by another method so that they won't be tipped over by winds or any other forces. Contents of the chemical toilets must be disposed of off-site at the treatment plant or any other DEQ-approved facility. So if the applicants are unable to gain the necessary DEQ or local approvals for a wastewater treatment and disposal system to serve the permanent bathrooms, we want an agreement in place that another approvable solution will be found, or that the amphitheater will be deconstructed, which obviously isn't an ideal situation for anybody. But the health department feels that, you know, the rewrite may face challenges in the way of gaining approval. It's yet to be determined if approvable solutions exist for an on-site wastewater treatment and disposal system, but obviously one has to be found, so that's a condition we want included in the variance if it's approved. And then again, the variance can't be construed as a guarantee that a wastewater system will gain approval from DEQ.
Can I interpret your statement on that last thing, that the engineering is not complete, we don't know if that site can support the proper drain fields and stuff from that? So
No, that's not it.
okay, that's kind of how I interpreted what you just said, is we don't know if that site can support the wastewater
Space-wise.
treatment. Space-wise, is that what it is?
I mean, I can't comment with any certainty because that's what that whole review process is for. There's so many details that get looked at. I guess to boil it all down, the point of addressing that is just saying that we haven't been shown a plan that will work at this point.
And I'll address that when I'm
So failure to comply with the conditions of a variance, should it be approved, would void the variance in its entirety, is one point we would like incorporated. The variance doesn't relieve the applicants of any other obligations under local, state, or federal laws or regs. Approval of this variance would not constitute approval of any new modified food service facilities or operations. Like I said, they've applied for those approvals. That's underway. Those reviews are happening. But we don't want to confuse that this variance grants those approvals. So I hope I didn't take too long and hope that made sense. That's what I have. Is there any questions?
Yeah, I guess at this point, we'll open it up to board or staff comments or questions. And maybe as part of the comments or questions part, I'm assuming that we'll have a question or two pop up that would be best for the applicant to handle, and then at that time, we'll take the opportunity for the applicant to speak. So at this point, let's just open it up for questions or comments. By
Questions
board
to
or
staff?
Pardon?
Just questions for staff.
Questions of staff or of the applicant. We'll use this as an opportunity to segue into the applicant as well, just as the questions deem appropriate.
So do you have any infrastructure in the ground yet?
Do you want me to come up?
Yeah,
yeah,
There are a number of things that I.
This is when we segue, so
Yeah,
come on up.
I think we let them talk first,
Come on
because
up.
they're gonna answer one.
Then if you,
Yeah.
just so that we got a clear record, state your name and
Yep.
whatnot, so it all goes to the record.
Nick Shikota, I'm the owner of Logjam Presents on the Wilma and the Top Hat as well. And we own all the improvements of the amphitheater and are 100% responsible for all shows at the amphitheater. A couple things that came up that I thought would be worth talking about. The original request for the variance was a little bit more complicated than I think what was presented, in that there is no amphitheater like this existing in the Missoula area, and one of the things we wanted to get was some good operating history. So we got 6 shows in last year that did let us see the number of porta potties we put out and what kind of usage they got, and the locations on the site of those porta potties, and were they in the best strategic location for future bathrooms. We learned a lot. We are going to up what we had for porta potties from 44 to 55, because we felt like while there weren't a lot of lines at set breaks and other things, there were some lines that could be reduced. The DEQ process is, as some of you may or may not know, is a very complicated process, and that site's a complicated process. To answer your question, we're very confident that the DEQ, we've had a lot of discussions with them, will approve this. It's more of a matter of how much of the site gets used for the drain field and what strategic ways that we can address not using an entire site for the drain field to support bathroom facilities 18 times a year. So it's a unique situation in that we're not building a permanent facility that's operating 24/7, 300 plus days a year. We're operating 18 days a year, and we're trying to be the most strategic we can with that overall site and use it wisely so it can be used for future development. So working with the DEQ and the health department and finding different solutions, if they exist, without using the whole site. In the end, if you have to use a lot of that site for the drain field, that's something that we have to take on. But we're trying to use it best as possible, and that's part of the process of going through this. To get back to the reason we fully intended on doing bathrooms, which is about a $250,000 to $300,000 cost this year. To get back to the concessions, the first show is the only one that we had issues with the temperature control. It was 100 and some degrees, if you remember, last June. And our coolers were not able to keep up with how often we were opening and closing those doors. And what we garnered from that was we would be way better served providing food services with a permanent facility, rather than food trucks or other portable coolers. So we're making the $250,000, $300,000 investment this year in the kitchen facility with very large coolers that can handle the volume of food and the other products that we have out there. And we felt that that was the issue from a public health standpoint last year, was we want to make sure we're providing food in the same manner we do at the Top Hat and our other organizations, and not have the kind of risk that we had last year with portable coolers. So this has no public funding to this project. It's a 100% privately funded project. And funds are somewhat limited when you're building this kind of venue and the quality that we want to build it to in the manner that we do. So we wanted to spend the investment this year that we were going to spend on the bathrooms towards the food service, make sure that's operating really effectively, and then have the bathroom facilities come online next year. Those were a couple clarifications that I wanted to make. I would say, and I know we're all different and they're all different entities. A competing entity that we do compete with, which is Big Sky Brewery, has run, even though they do have a few fixed bathrooms, they run almost entirely on porta potties, and they have for over 15 years. And that is not our intent. I mean, our intent, forget the health issues that we have to address. From a customer standpoint, we want good food concessions, we want good bathroom facilities, and we want to build these bathroom facilities for more efficient customer interaction than anything else. I mean, we want to make sure they're safe for public, but we want to have our customers have a good experience, and we think permanent bathrooms are the way to do that.
So in operations, your first show is May 31st, your last show this year is going to be September 11th.
That's
You've got
correct.
18. Surely you're going to run that thing more often than that. You're going to have private events, you're going to have, I mean, I would hope financially you're going to run it more than just 18 times a year. So let's say, I'm worried, same reason about the timeline. So you only have so much construction weather that works. So if you get your permit in by September 1st, your last show September 11th, you can't start construction if it takes you 3 months. Now we're into December. Now we're into the no construction season really. So by the time the weather becomes amenable to construction, you're looking at March, and then you start in May again. So is that enough time?
I think it is. You know, my defense would be, we built the whole amphitheater from January to have it up and running by the end of June last year. I mean, we are, I think, a pretty effective construction manager, and I believe, I'm very confident that we could build the bathrooms 6 weeks after, in worst case, 6 weeks after we get the COSA app. I'm very confident we can get those bathrooms done.
So there's no infrastructure in the ground right now because we don't know where the drain fields are going to be and all that.
We know where the drain fields would be. The question is how much more we have to expand those drain fields. And that's something that we want to work through both with the health department. There's some ideas that have been put out there on the best way to handle that without using the entire site for drain fields. I guess I can't speak for the health board, but I don't think anyone wants to see this piece of land entirely used for a drain field. It's not really optimal. And we're trying to find a solution. The health department doesn't allow storage tanks, so we're trying to find a solution that will satisfy all parties, that doesn't use the entire site for a drain field.
And I guess that was my concern. My background's chemical engineering, so I looked at the map and did the math in my head, and I was like, it's going to be a pretty tight fit for septic drain fields for that many people, 4,000 people at a show, doing all that kind of stuff. It looks like a pretty tight fit, and I could see potentially DEQ or other people having issues during that process, especially with it being so close to the river. So that was more my concern with the COSA permit, is there could be a lot of back and forth between engineers and them on that side. So my concern again is timing. If it doesn't get submitted until September 1, if they take 9 months to figure it out, we're running into another variance next year.
So let's take both those on. If we want to move that date up of submittal, I would be comfortable with that. The site, remember, isn't just the amphitheater. Kettle House has a lot more land. It's how much of that land wants to be used to service these bathrooms. And I agree with you. It's probably more than 18 times a year with private events. Private events are going to be pretty small, relatively speaking. They're not 4,000 person events. They're probably 200 or 300 person events on that patio on the other side.
So how is Kettle House running their bathrooms?
What's that?
They have their own system.
Is there any way to expand off their existing system? I mean, you're awfully close. Is there any way to work off their system?
There might be.
And create more permanent bathrooms there?
Well, their permanent bathrooms, they only have a couple permanent
Right.
bathrooms because it's even though it's a fairly large production facility, it doesn't have a ton of employees. And so their drain fields are in the same location as the ones that we're using for the existing concession stands. They do have a very large drain field across from the brewery that they're using for other things other than their bathrooms, is my understanding. But there's a lot of different areas on that site that we can work through. Again, we're just trying to make sure that we use that property in the most effective way.
I'm going to ask this question both to, for the purpose of, so I've got a question, and also for the purpose of we've got a couple new board members from last year in variance, and so the purpose of this question will also be to provide a little bit of history and background that you did a real good job of filling us in on last year. Basically, one of the issues with designing the drain field and sizing the drain field, from what I recall, was that they have a very large number of people for very short periods of time. And so if you just follow regular state law, you end up sizing for 4,000 people. But the 4,000 people are only there for 18 events a year. So you end up with if you follow the standard design procedures, you end up with a drain field that's way, way oversized for their seasonal usage and whatnot. So with that background, I guess my question is what kind of progress are you making with DEQ and the design engineers on kind of solving that problem to get a reasonably sized drain field?
I think there's, and some of this is county and some of this is DEQ, some of it's county regulation and some of it's DEQ. I mean, from DEQ's standpoint, I believe they would be fine with just tanks that you can pump. From the county standpoint, that's not something they want to see. So
So you can pump to meet, so instead of the effluent ultimately going to a drain field, it would go into a pumping truck and be hauled off-site.
That's correct.
Got it.
And that's not something the county does, so we've looked at solutions where you meter it in, so it's kind of a combo, if you will, and like Territorial could speak to this, I'm not super technical in this area, but it basically puts it into this tank, and then the tank meters it into a smaller size drain field that doesn't require as much. And the challenge there has become, that works, but then what if you have back-to-back-to-back shows in instances, and some of that gets out of our control because we live in Montana and I don't live in Seattle or Denver. I'm kind of subject to the routing that goes between those two from a music buying standpoint. So we get the shows when we get them, and we have to take what we get. We don't have as much influence as bigger markets have. So if we have back-to-back shows, in an ideal world, we'd be able to pump those tanks in addition to the metering, and that's not something this county likes to see. So it's finding that solution with some kind of combination of those different areas is what we're looking at. And it's really an engineering. I do believe we're very confident that we can get something through with DEQ. We've had enough conversations. It's what can we get through with DEQ that also complies with current county regulation and how that all works together.
And I presume that all those, the answers, or at least proposed answers to all those issues need to happen before the application is submitted on the September 1st date or whatever date we come up with. So there's a fair bit of engineering and answers to those technical questions that need to happen before your COSA review is submitted.
And our engineers have looked at this a lot. Territorial has examined this. It's trying to find that compromise.
Yeah.
You know, in our ideal world, we pump out of tanks. And I appreciate that's not what the health department wants to see for a variety of reasons, but that's, you know, those are the kind of the one would be create a huge drain field that uses the site, and you do it just into the drain field. The other extreme is tanks that get pumped, and in their line is kind of what we're trying to solve for.
Can you speak to the tank thing, Ellen?
All of the tanks.
Yeah, I mean,
Our
is there a
experience with
variance?
holding tanks is they don't hold. They just don't hold. They're a good idea, but they tend to leak, overflow, and those sorts of things happen. So that's our history on our holding tank regulations.
Is there any new technology
We've been
that's?
through that several times, that conversation.
Gene?
But we do allow it for government entities because somehow the government doesn't overflow. I think that there are options that we should be looking at in the county because there are situations where a holding tank makes way more sense than anything else. And other counties, like Lake County, if you have one, you have to show every year that you had it pumped. It's not, I mean, I think it can be a tool for exceptions. And so I still think that it's just silly if you think that really needs a facility to hold the equivalent of a small town in Montana, you know, to address that, but only a few times a year, and it seems like it's not a good use of land.
And honestly,
It's just not, doesn't make sense to me. I mean, no way is going to invest this much money in this facility and have a toilet leaking on the ground.
And as a microbiologist, and it's that close to the river, and I know drain fields, and it's established EPA-approved technology, yada, yada, yada. You know, that's a lot of human waste being dumped in the ground right next to the river. I personally, from my perspective, I'd rather see a hybrid approach or something if the technology's there, because I know they can do berms for chemical control, you know, make sure stuff doesn't leak. There's all sorts of ways to design it. You know, I think there could be a good compromise in that capability there that works, that satisfies both sides, and I'd rather see that, especially doing the math on the economic impact of this amphitheater. 18 shows, 4,000 people a show. You know, this is a huge potential asset to the community, and so I think there's probably, the public health issues can probably easily be solved with existing technologies that are out there that won't delay their ability. I'm concerned with having a variance written that says you can't get it to work, you have to tear the site
Yeah,
down.
I don't know.
That really bothers me, but that's because I think I look at
I
this.
can't say I
from a different
disagree
angle.
with that.
So, but, you know, I think from my perspective, just even from that, as, you know, I do work in engineering, I do work in microbiology, there probably has to be something that fits the best of both worlds that exist out there. It might take a lot of engineering time from them and their engineers to figure out something that satisfies everybody's side, but I think we can get the answers that'll make it so public health can be comfortable with the solution, but it doesn't necessarily have to take up, you know, 500 acres of drainfield site and wipe out the rest of the Bonner location just to handle sewage treatment.
So Ellen, what would it take if there was some sort of solution that involved a holding tank? What's the process with the health department to work that through? And I'm just saying, because this thing operates less than 100 hours a year.
You'd have to
And it's
change
all
your-
in spurts, you know, so it's like a perfect reason for a holding tank.
You could do a variance, but it's in your rules.
Okay,
And could I just back up, because before we got,
yeah.
not to change the subject, but
I'm terrible for that. so.
the applicant is not, nor am I advising, you know, sort of open-ended, we could do a variance for 2 or 3 years, but for the history, of particularly the new members on the board, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, if my memory serves, that, you know, we could have had a 2-year variance last year. But this applicant wants to do what he's doing, collect
Right.
data, get going, da. So I think we're all on the same page of get the operation up and running, get the data, move forward. And I don't want to say that the 1 year is artificial, but there was nothing in the rule that said we even had to be sitting here this year. So I think we're, you know, it could have been next year that this was,
It could have been.
was due.
In hindsight,
Yeah.
would have been better to
But
do
I'm
that.
not saying that as a criticism. I'm just saying I appreciate that you try to move it forward. Could have gone with 2 years. And I think we're, you know, you're getting more data. You've got the operation up and running. We're learning things about food. We're actually going to get an upgrade based on the real conditions out there on food. And a second year. So we're getting a second chance to look at it and continue to move forward. The fact of the matter, this has to be stated in the record, is the COSA is going to, you know, it's a risk. I don't think it's a gigantic risk from what you've said, but we can't legally say in the record, you know, anything other than the COSA does have to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And we did spend a lot more time on that for the benefit of the newer board members at last year's discussion. So I think we're still on the same track. Of trying to find something that works and allow the venue to move forward in a safe fashion.
And
So
I'm-
you're saying you're open to whatever solutions they come up with, and if it involves a holding tank or a hybrid thereof, you're willing to look at it?
We
We'd have to change our
would
rules.
definitely need to talk more about what this, and I know the staff is doing that. I know that that's what you're talking about. I think Shannon has something to add to that because she's been closer to those conversations. Shannon?
I'll
Shannon,
stand
you
up
wanna-
here. And I want to make a distinction between a holding tank. A holding tank is something that has no outlet at all to it. And then what they're looking at is storage. So how can they store it and meter it out to an on-site drain field over time? Those are two different things. The second thing won't require a variance. Just having a holding tank, a tank in the ground that has no outlet is what would require the variance. And so I think that we're looking, and we've been agreeable to looking for ways to address this really unique situation in a way that still is in keeping with our regulations. But if that doesn't happen, I mean, there is the opportunity for a solution to be based on a variance. Because again, a variance is for a unique situation. I would hate to see that something like the holding tank prohibition, which has there's a lot of good reasons for it, be wiped away for this particular instance because this is really unique. Why? And it's one of the reasons why the health department is supporting this variance for the second year because this situation is very unique. It is situations with other amphitheaters and other like large built bleacher. What are those called? Bleachers? Grandstands, which is why they're required to have permanent bathrooms in this county where maybe they wouldn't in another county. It's because those things have been built without the sanitation facilities in mind. And the porta potty thing doesn't work overtime. Just like the holding tank thing. People, when you flush a toilet, you just don't think about where it goes. So we want a solution that works for people. It's like setting someone up for success. We want a solution that's going to work so they can have the toilets flushed and they don't have to think about where it goes. It doesn't mean that it won't take some maintenance on their part or some operational things on their part, but that's what our rules are geared towards, and that's what we're working towards with it.
And I appreciate the definition of a holding tank having no outlet.
Yeah.
And that's why, in our experience, we have, this board has not
When they
allowed
over-
holding tanks because it always just seemed like this.
When they exceed capacity, you're
Right,
walking in
it
it.
doesn't mean we're against a design that allows
Right.
temporary holding for better control on the outlet. That's the very important difference.
And I think the rub, and this isn't a criticism of the health department, I think they're following regulation. The rub is that originally we wanted something that, storage tank is the right term, but we wanted a storage tank, and if we wanted to do back-to-back shows, we did have the ability to come in and pump that if the disbursement couldn't keep up. And I think that's one of the type of issues that we're trying to figure out in this process. I'd ask the board, we're obviously an operator already in this community in a lot of different ways, whether it's the Wilma, the Top Hat. I think if you look at how we run the kitchen at the Top Hat, how we run our operations, if you look at how we ran the amphitheater last year and how we cleaned the bathrooms, and we required our provider to provide only new facilities. Every single one of those porta potties was a brand new unused porta potty. The way we clean them every show, the way we fence them and manage that, I think anybody that went out there would say it was managed well. And we would do the same with this. We're very conscientious of our brand and our image and our customers, and that would continue. That's not going to change.
Yeah, I don't think there's any feeling on the board that this is not a good project and you're not a good operator. I'm thinking cost-wise. I'm like, oh, okay, you're spending $300,000 now on new kitchen facilities, and now you're spending $300,000 on new bathroom facilities, and this thing runs for 3.5 months a year. I'm just thinking, how in the
Have
world?
faith that I get
How
the
in the
numbers to
world do you make that work?
That's the applicant's business.
Right, I'm just,
We're not
For what it's worth, the
Oh, I
amphitheater
know.
was profitable in its first season. And we envision it to be profitable in this season, and the profits of this season are going right back into investing into these bathrooms. And that's really one of the reasons we're asking for more time, is that that with the profits of this season and doing 18 shows, that we can reinvest those profits into doing the right bathroom facilities. We could do it, I'm not being critical here, we could do what other venues have done, which is meet the code. Or I don't know if we can do this, but I mean, we could undersize the bathroom facilities, but that's not what we want to do. I mean, I don't want lines waiting outside my bathroom facilities. I want people to be able to come, particularly in the women's bathroom, where the problem really lies in these type of events. We want adequate facilities to meet the demands of these pops. So we want to have the funds to do it right and have adequate number of stalls.
I'd like to think we
often
have
that's
longer
different.
lines because we wash our hands.
I think there's a lot. But
We're in there longer.
Agreed. And it needs more fixtures, and we want to be able to accommodate that and do that right. And so code is often undersizes bathroom required facilities in our experience in these type of events. And you have to figure out what that right number of facilities is.
Well, that's how code gets changed when someone does something that's never been done before.
That's right, but I think this approach has allowed all the parties to make progress and adjust as we go along without
Yep.
stopping the activity. So we're just really supportive of variance in the conditions.
So one comment I would make, or I guess perhaps it's a question, is there any plans in place to kind of avoid the time crunch that we're kind of in right now? I mean, we're sort of sitting here in mid to late April at a board meeting to grant variance, that if we don't grant it, the show doesn't go on this summer. So is there any plans in place that if we're going to be in front of the board next year, that it's earlier? So
Well, I
that-
think that's the idea with the COSA and the requirement they put on us that we have to get it in by a certain date.
Mhm.
In an ideal world, yes, we would have done this quicker.
That's why I wonder, because it is complicated and there's going to be things to work through, whether it makes more sense for us to give a 2-year variance because we're allowed to. And that way, I mean, we could still write in here with a goal of a permanent facility by 2019, but it doesn't put us in this position, and it doesn't next year, and allows us more time to work through finding the right solution.
We're all shaking our heads, yes, it's just the applicant's request.
We'd be thrilled to have it. It's our goal to put bathrooms in next year for sure. We want it from a customer standpoint, but if we want to put a little padding on it, I would be very comfortable with it, obviously.
Seems like where we would want to hold real firm would be on the deadline to submit for COSA review and whatnot. Otherwise, all we've done is
Right.
kick the can down the
Right,
road.
I agree.
I would say as long as the COSA is submitted by September, whatever, first or whatever the date was, I would not oppose a few years.
I wouldn't oppose so long as the design, the problems are getting worked on, and the only way we can assure that is for that COSA review deadline.
You could
But
even-
my proposal for that would be the first condition, to amend that, to strike the word before and insert with a goal of a permanent solution by the 2019 operating. So it's still,
And I don't know how the applicant would take this, so I don't, it's just an idea. Part of what I believe the applicant's doing is checking in with us.
yeah.
So if we go with 2 years, maybe checking in or in some way, if you'd be amenable, might be something that works for all. I don't feel that it's necessary, especially if you have a condition that COSA gets in there. But
Necessary for the 2-year or necessary for the check-in?
I don't think it's necessary for the 2-year. I mean, we're.
Okay, you're right.
Because there's nothing to prevent them from coming in
No,
again.
no, but if you wanted to direct staff to let you know a year from now where things are at before the next season, you could direct staff to do that, and we'd be glad to do it.
But the check-in is really beneficial.
I think so. I mean, that's part of, you
So
appear to
that-
be staging, and I get that,
So
but
if
we
it's a
don't
way
have
to-
to have all of this mechanism for staging, that kind of progress.
However, I do not like the condition that says that he has to tear it down. I think that's pretty extreme. We have somebody that's willing to work with us.
On the one hand, it's extreme, and on the other hand, all it's saying is what the law already says.
Yeah, that's.
So we're not saying anything that isn't already a legal requirement. We're just making the applicant sure that they've read that part of the law. This way, I'll pass that by our attorney.
No, I agree, it does appear harsh, but I do think it is exactly what Ross just said, it's just applying the law as written.
So I guess I'd like to keep it in there because it's the fact.
Well, because the other really strict interpretation would be, you don't operate until all this stuff's in place. And I think we've all agreed with the benefits and the means which to do that is you do operate and you get these things in place. But that's
Given
the
that somewhat
alternative.
draconian, I mean, then I would ask if you consider the 2-year.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. If you're gonna leave that penalty in, why don't we give them the buffer?
Could we,
Can I
Shannon?
just say something about that particular one? So we did
The-
change it a little bit from last year.
Particular
The
one?
whole concept of deconstruct the
Oh, yeah.
amphitheater. I think last year it said, hey, if you can't figure out DEQ approval, you need to deconstruct the amphitheater. And what we talked about this year as staff is that if they have trouble finding a solution, a DEQ solution, they're going to look for another solution. There is a lot of money that has been put into this. It's a beautiful facility, for all the reasons that everybody talked about. And so we wanted to leave that open, that maybe another variance from the health board. There may be another solution that we're not even thinking about. So we did change that language this year to recognize that a DEQ approval might not be the end of the road.
Did you see that?
So
And
it's
that,
less draconian this
than
year.
it was last
Yeah,
year.
that's
But last year was, I
That's
think
fine.
it was intended, because it was under construction, it wasn't a completed facility, so it was kind of it was in between. It wasn't, all the money hadn't been invested and the building hadn't been completed.
It always takes longer than you think and costs more than you think. So
Well,
I
and
want to
no-
make sure we.
Yeah, and nobody at this table really has the power over DEQ.
Yeah,
So
no.
we just have to be cognizant.
Yeah.
DEQ's been very accommodating, and they've worked with us, so and we were, territorial in particular has been very communicated with DEQ and has got their read on it, and we feel pretty confident on our working relationship with them.
I just wondered, the one public comment that we received talked about why aren't they connecting to a public sewer? Well, there is talk about one in Bonner someday, but as we know from our experience in Sealy Lake, it can take 30 years. So
I wish
I
we
wouldn't
were
want to hold
connected
you
to a
up.
public sewer, trust me.
Yeah.
My life would be much easier.
Mhm.
So with that, are we getting close to a motion by the board?
I'd love to make a motion, but I think there were changes. Jean
Right.
had one.
Well, I don't think we need to make it though. It seems like it's all covered. Just to change, I can't find the exact, is the motion written in one of these?
The motion,
It is.
It's with conditions.
There's nothing you're changing it right now.
I haven't seen a proposed motion other than just
Shannon, is your
the
motion?
staff recommendation is that we approve the variance request. I haven't seen
Yeah,
actually
with the
proposed
following
motion.
conditions, yes.
And you'd be approving it.
So it's this
You
conclusion?
should make it.
Well, that's what Gene, I think, would just say and go.
Do we think we need that with that goal on there?
So
It
I
just
can-
says to allow the review to occur. It doesn't say they have to have it in place, so I think it's probably okay like it's written.
So I'm confused. Are you removing your 2-year idea?
No.
Oh, okay, that's, I was
okay.
confused on that.
No, I'm talking about whether or not we need to, that first condition needed to be
Oh, the
changed. I think we
conditions,
decided
right.
it didn't.
So sorry, Jim Urban, the findings of fact in the proposed decision now state December 31st, 18. It sounds like that just needs to be amended by a year from what's being discussed.
And then I heard keeping the condition about the COSA of September 1st, 2018
Right, we don't need to
in
do
there.
that, then.
Right. So we'd only be changing the motion
That date.
and the conditions to extend that date.
To the 19th, or 2019.
That's-
So what date would we be extending here?
December 31st, 2019 for the variance, 2 years,
Only it's only a year and a half.
a year and a half.
Okay. Got it.
Instead of
It's
6
two
months,
seasons.
instead of 6 months, we're giving them a year and a half.
Right.
I mean, does it need to say December 31st? Can it say whatever day today is?
Well,
could.
I think he wants it.
I think Anna's got some thoughts on that
Oh,
right now.
sure.
Well, it just seems like there's more of a chance that you'll be here if you make the variance.
Too long.
You know what I mean? So it seems like the end of the year that
Right.
it makes more sense than today, 2 years from now.
Yeah, because then I'm afraid that we then end up here.
So
Right.
December 31st,
Season's gonna
2019.
start tomorrow.
Yeah.
We need action today.
Yeah.
Yeah. Depends how,
Okay.
Okay.
The December
Is there any more?
31st, 2019, from our perspective.
yeah, it's not 2 years, I get it. It was a little
It's a year and a half,
difficulty.
yeah.
Was there
It
any
solves
other
the
public
same
comment, or we
issue. I
ready
mean,
for
we're-
motion?
No,
You're not
what I
doing-
want to do is wait for public comment until we have our motion on
Okay.
the table real clearly so the public knows what they'd be commenting on.
I just have one clarifying question, and my apologies that I was late, but I think what I'm hearing is there's a chance that depending on the permanent solution, this could not come back to us at all, but if there's a solution that requires an exception to the current code, that this may come back to us again requesting a variance on the, whatever the
Good.
design of the permanent facility
Good.
is.
Yes.
And we're all reasonably open to that potential as you continue to work with help. I just want to make sure I'm clear about it.
I think
Believe so.
that's a takeaway.
This is
All right.
just a variance on the toilet requirement.
Yes.
So Gene, could you
I'm-
walk us through a
Sure.
motion so that we really wrap our heads around what our motion is?
I would move that the Board of Health approve the variance requested by Logjam Presents to use chemical toilets at the Kettle House Amphitheater at 605 Cold Smoke Avenue in Bonner, Montana until December 31st, 2019, under the conditions that were listed in the staff report.
All right. We've got a motion on the floor. Any public comments or questions on the motion on the floor? Any further board or staff comments or questions on the motion on the floor?
Ross, Jim Urban, we did receive one written comment.
Okay.
you all have it in your packets.
Yeah.
I just wanted to offer, I don't know what protocol is, if you wanted me to read that or,
Why don't you go ahead and read it?
okay.
Is it long?
Isn't it
No. Should I disclose the author?
It's all public.
Sure, okay. This is received from Helen Pent, Tuesday, April 17th. It says, "Dear Jim Irvin, I'm providing comment on the Kettle House Amphitheater variance request offered in the public notice on April 12th, 2018. I take no issue with the specific variance request for use of chemical toilets for the 2018 concert season. Instead, my concern is that there is no permanent sanitation proposal in place for the amphitheater. The standard septic and drain field proposal described in the variance request does not seem to be a sustainable solution for such a major venue. I worry that options like a sequencing batch reactor wastewater treatment system have not been thoroughly explored. As Bonner continues to see growth, a centralized water treatment plant will be necessary. Towns like Sealy Lake and Craig have recognized the importance of these systems and are moving forward with centralized water treatment. Perhaps instead of granting ad hoc variances, the City County Board of Health should be working with the applicant to begin to integrate the amphitheater and the brewery into a coherent and efficient wastewater treatment system. The applicant is making a thoughtful long-term investment in Missoula County. I would expect the county and the Bonner Milltown Community Council to step up on the challenge and build the infrastructure that will help to support this investment and many others into the future. Sincerely, Helen Pent Jenkins."
Any other board or staff comments or discussion on the motion?
Well, if we could have a condition that 44 of the 66 porta potties were for women only, I think that'd
They were what?
For women only.
With that, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
That's everybody, so moved. All right.
Okay.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everybody.
we appreciate your consideration, thank you.
be James.
All right, now we move on to item number 2. Of course, now I lost my agenda. Yeah, for now, yeah. Item number 2, set public hearing to consider approving Missoula's amended smoking ordinance as adopted by City Council on March 19th, 2018, so it can be applied to territory. Shannon and Kayla. Kayla. Sorry. Gonna walk us through that. Thanks, Kayla.
I think this is going to be a lot shorter, if I can see from the beginning. All right, so we are here to talk about the Missoula smoking ordinance. If you will recall, in January, you approved a resolution recommending that the city council make some changes to Missoula's smoking ordinance that was created in 1999. It was created before the Montana Clean Indoor Air Act of 2005 really made it illegal to smoke in places of work and indoor public places. And so after that went into effect in 2009 and 2005 and 2009, the city ordinance was less stringent than state law. So we just started using state law instead of the city ordinance, but realized that it was something that needed to be cleaned up. And so in January, the board did adopt a resolution and recommended these provisions to the city council, or recommended to the city council that these things be changed. You didn't recommend specific language because it was still in flux. We were meeting with city and county law enforcement and city and county attorneys. We were really focused on the enforcement procedures and penalties, trying to make sure that that was all clear. But the things that the board recommended were that any provisions that were less stringent than state law either be changed or deleted. That the health department's smoking shelter policy would be incorporated in the ordinance. We have a policy because state law doesn't address it very directly. It allows smoking shelters, but they can't be indoor enclosed public places. And so we have a policy to say kind of how enclosed can you get before it's an enclosed public place. And it's worked very well for us, but it would help for it to be in regulation instead of a policy. We asked that you include, or you recommended that e-cigarettes be included in smoking prohibitions, that smoking be prohibited in certain outdoor public places. That was the Parks Department, City Parks Department was very interested in codifying some of their policies that prohibited smoking, especially where a lot of children play. And then also to provide businesses with the ability to prohibit smoking near openings. Those businesses that own their whole lot, this wasn't a problem for. If they wanted to prohibit smoking within 25 foot of a doorway, they could. But that was less clear downtown. And so they don't own the sidewalk. Can they say that somebody can't smoke within 25 feet of their opening? When businesses would call us, we're like, we don't know, but some of them put up signs because people kind of generally do follow those signs. And then clarifying enforcement procedures and penalties. So that is what we took to the city council.
So when we were at the city council, before going to the public safety and health committee, like Shannon said, we really focused on the enforcement piece. We thought that was going to be the bigger hurdle, truthfully. And then when it was public hearing was set and we had that meeting, the biggest issue was the vape shops wanted to be exempt here in Missoula, primarily 4. So they came in and their owners and some of the employees stated that they like to allow customers the ability to test their products or try the e-juice before buying it. And after a lengthy discussion, the council decided to send it back into committee where they then asked us to come up with exemption language, which initially we were hesitant about. But then eventually we came up to the language to the best of our ability is what I'll say, that we felt would satisfy them. And we also did site visits to the 4 vape shops, myself and another health department employee. We did further research and then basically brought all of this back to the Public Safety and Health Committee, shared what we learned. There was also representation from, on the national level, from the American Cancer Society, American Heart, who both spoke basically stating against the exemption of having them not exempt in this ordinance. And then from there, basically the council decided against allowing this exemption language, which thankfully with the help of board members and some several council members, it really went through smoothly from there. But the council also sent it back asking for us to work with the national organizations on a few word changes here and there so it was concise across the board, which we did. And like Shannon said, on March 19th, the City Council unanimously approved the changes, making Missoula now the 9th local ordinance here in Montana. The other 8 are countywide. Missoula is 9 that'll have e-cigarettes in their local clean indoor air act ordinance. But I will say though that the City of Missoula is now the 4th that has the setback option for businesses, which is kind of neat as well.
So the reason that we're here, the City Council did approve that. I think it was either today or yesterday when it went into effect in the city, 30 days after they approved it. But this is a health ordinance, and Montana state law allows the mayor to apply the ordinance within 5 miles of the boundaries of the city limits. If it's approved by both the health board and the county commissioners. And so that is what we are here to ask, is that you start that process by approving the ordinance to allow it to be applied extraterritorially. This is generally the area that it would include. The points are, Travis could explain why it's bubbles instead of...
Looks like a puff of smoke.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a puff of smoke. But basically, the computer goes 5 miles out from any point, and so it ends up looking like this from the city limits. Travis put this together for us. But this is the area that would be included. We think that this is really important to go ahead and apply it extraterritorially for a couple of reasons. One is that it is going to provide some options for, say, county parks if they want to prohibit smoking in some of the areas where there are a lot of children. It will give businesses some opportunity to prohibit smoking within 25 feet of their doors or other entries. But it also will address vaping. And one of the things that we really learned through the city council process that Kayla could speak better to than I can is that vaping is not safe, and it's not safe for bystanders, and that it really does have health impacts. And it's important to provide those protections beyond just the city limits to incorporate the rest of the urban area. And so with that, we are recommending that the health board set a public hearing for your next meeting to consider approving this ordinance to allow it to be in effect within 5 miles of the city limits. We also have it scheduled for the county commissioners to, I think, in early June. That's it.
Gene?
So you said that 4 counties had county-wide. Do we have that authority? I mean, so we're just doing this
So the
extraterritorially.
You know, that probably comes back to me in part because we were the first locality to do this. And the advice, which is pretty dusty in my mind now, at that time, which was some time ago, was to use the city authorities. And it was from there that we grew to, well, geez, it's health, we could use it for extraterritorial. So we didn't build it on the health board authorities at that time. I'm not sure that we should or shouldn't have, or should or shouldn't have this time. Yeah, we're also looking at the end of our distinction. Now, the areas that have, like for example, Yellowstone just enacted theirs and they used health board authorities. They are being challenged on that. It may be a successful challenge, I don't know. But they're also I can't think of the name of the type of the district that they are, that has a little bit of different authority than you do.
Right.
Huh?
Well, their Board of Health did something, made a
Yeah.
district or something.
A few months ago, when we were talking about this, I could have remembered, but it's a different type of district. And even with that, they're being challenged. So
we'll let them work through it
You know,
first.
I can't say that it was right or wrong, good or bad, but it really comes back to sort of my history with it.
The other thing is that it is possible, once we go to the urban area, to come back and have, to look at it from the health board
Yeah,
standpoint.
included.
But we're also hopeful that a lot of these will be incorporated into the state law. And so having Missoula join these other counties will help that effort for statewide legislation. And I don't know if you guys saw in the news yesterday, but Ravalli County is now mounting that same recommendations to include e-cigarettes in their, in their smoking prohibitions.
So I think we have again, for me, it was very solid footing with the rule, the authority that city councils have, that counties don't have, and being less certain of how that would hold up on the health board rule, which I did not ask Anna about.
I was just curious.
It does incorporate, in terms of level playing field, it does incorporate really almost all of that.
So if the city of Sealy did this,
They're not incorporated, they don't have the
But
authority.
they're under the clean indoor area, but then, this would not affect it for the baby.
So Sealy and Frenchtown are the two bigger ones left out.
Yeah. But we could look at other measures on how to do that. Well, I also don't want to, this department, thank you for bringing that up. The selfish point is, thank you, Anna. This department's enforcement capabilities to do all of that outdoor enforcement is also something that I didn't think was feasible.
So you're looking for a motion on this?
Yeah,
There's
the
no-
motion would be just to
Set the hearing.
set the public hearing.
Yeah, I'll make the recommended motion to set the public hearing.
All right. Any further board or staff discussion or comments on the motion? Any public comments or discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
So moved.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Kayla, and thank you, Shannon. We don't have March minutes, so we're going to move on to item number 4. And my understanding is Lonnie Hutchinson is unavailable.
Yes.
So we're going to move on to 4B, which is section 1, population health status, maternal child health, goal 1, sustain and increase home visiting services that demonstrate effectiveness in reducing child maltreatment. Vicki, I believe is
Yeah,
kind
so
of.
Kathy, I believe, is
Kathy.
in contact with Vicki to come on out.
Just kidding, there's some water, I'll go do that. While we're waiting to bring our manager up for number 4 and 5, it's the same person. I think I could probably, if the board was interested, do the preliminary budget.
Let's jump to number 6.
Action.
Approve preliminary budget request to the city.
So this is primarily for new board members, long-standing board members know that we are funded through a number of means, but our tax funding is both city and county. So the city is levied in the city only, and the county tax dollars are levied outside of those boundaries, county only, and each handles it a bit differently. And their city and county budget schedule is also not the same schedule. So our budget by interlocal agreement actually falls under the ultimate budget process and administration of the county commissioners. So I need to bring what I ask of the city, usually ahead of my bringing my full budget to you, which is usually, and should again be next month, because their deadline for requests is Monday. So what we typically do is I calculate the amount of salary and any fringe changes that I expect to have on non-grant funded positions. We have a lot of grant funded positions. We don't try to draw additional tax dollars for those. That is a problem, and then I take 60% of that estimated cost, kind of roughly based on the population, city versus county only, and make that request just to keep the existing staff that we have. So in the health fund and in the animal control fund, that's what these requests represent using that equation. In other years, we've asked for more. Last year, we got the suicide prevention enhancement.
Don't be afraid to ask for more.
Right. My understanding that I continue to try to make sure is confirmed on all front is that that money is ongoing. Although the city and the county can always change the budget at the time they adopt it, but that the understanding last year. So I did not put any other additional new requests in. I also adjusted, because we had about $200,000 worth of cuts in personnel, net loss, I actually adjusted down the base amount before running this calculation, because when it goes up, I adjust it up, and I think it's only fair. If it goes down, I adjust it down to be fair and transparent with the city. So that's what this represents, and I would just like your approval of this request so I can forward it to the city. That would be the motion. Approve and forward these budget requests for FY19 to...
I think it's inappropriate for me to make a motion to my own budget, so.
Any questions or comments to Ellen on the budget issue?
No, we know this is coming.
I'll make the motion to approve and forward this budget request.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any public comments? We've got a motion on the floor to approve the budget request. Any public comments or discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
So moved. Thank you. And I see Vicky's here, so we can jump back up to 4B, and Vicky's gonna give us an update on national status.
Yes, thank you. Vicki Dundas, VICKIDUNDAS. Thank you. I'm here to update on a couple things. One first, and I know you have a packed agenda, so I'm going to be quick. And I know that you'll get these slides, correct, Julie? So that if you have questions about them later, if you want to go through them, you can check with me on those.
Vicki, if you go down to the little,
Yeah, is it okay if I leave it like this though? For me, it's easier.
Sure.
Okay.
See what's coming.
So here's an update, first of all, the routine updates that we do regularly on our strategic plan. And my strategic plan is regarding population health status, maternal child health home visiting, which I oversee most of those programs. It's our update for fiscal year 17. These are really wordy, basically. This is just our strategic plan, and like I said, I'm not gonna read them word for word. If you have questions, you can certainly contact me. So our first goal, though, in MCH home visiting for our strategic plan is to sustain and increase home visiting services that demonstrate effectiveness in child abuse and neglect prevention. Our first indicator was to help sustain our funding for our evidence-based or best practice programs. And here, those consist of Nurse Family Partnership, NFP, Safe Care, and then our Missoula Foster Child Health Program. We have others, but those are our best practice or evidence-based ones. So our first indicator, goal, objective was to maintain our targeted case management billing revenue for all three of those. And completely out of our control, we had some big changes in TCM billing at the state level, big changes in Medicaid. Targeted case management is a Medicaid billing revenue funding source. And as you probably know, it was reduced quite a bit this year by the state. I'll talk a little bit
Almost
about
80%. Almost
75 to 80% reduction in targeted case management billing. So we have failed this one miserably, but not because we didn't try. We actually went over to Helena and testified and did our best. The actions that we proposed to forward this goal and objective would be to review our billing reports quarterly, analyze our billing documentation via staff chart review, and then maximize billing units via staff training. So we do review our quarterly financials, monthly actually. And before the changes in TCM eligibility criteria, we were at about 70% of our projections at mid-year. So we were ahead of the game before things changed in Helena. We did do our chart review. That was completed with the staff in March of 2018. And we did our TCM training of staff in March of 2018, which we would have done anyway, but this one we reviewed the new eligibility criteria for TCM billing, which I have and I can send you if you're interested later, what the new eligibility criteria are. Objective 2 was to make sure that task orders and contracts and agreements are in place. So the action was to respond to any funding opportunities by DPHHS for NFP, and then our contracts with Child and Family Service Division for Safe Care and Foster Child Health, and to always explore additional funding options, of course, at any level. So the contract for NFP is in place for FY18, and they're working on the one for FY19. For Foster Child Health, we have our funding in place for fiscal year 18 and our application in process for FY19, which I'll talk about after this. Funding through CPS, CFSD, was terminated in October. We had kind of a double hit to our funding, but that was reinstated in March, and they did allow us to go back and do back billing from October. So we're in the process of doing that and have almost recouped those monies. In Safe Care, we again get a per session, per family stipend from Child and Family Service Division, and those are on track now. They're a little bit delayed. They've been kind of in flux as well, but we're on track now for those. And then our targeted case management, Medicaid billing, like I said, we've lost about 75% of our revenue for high-risk child related to cuts in Medicaid at the state. Targeted case management billing for high-risk pregnant has not been cut and is still on track. Goal 2 for maternal child health home visiting was to work on a collaborative pilot project between the university and community medical center. We want to do a universal postnatal home visiting pilot where we saw all women who delivered in a set category. For the purposes of the pilot, we just visited women at the hospital that delivered on Mondays and Tuesdays, and the goal was to introduce ourselves, and hopefully if we meet the women face to face, they would accept our offer of home visit more readily. So the indicator would be that we would contact, they'd be contacted by us at the hospital in their immediate postpartum period, so before they left the hospital after delivery.
Which population? Is this an at-risk population?
No, we wanted to see all women who deliver because we feel, and national trend, some research actually, like the Durham, North Carolina Connects research project, shows that almost any woman who delivers could use a little help once they get home with their baby, if they've never had a child before, or child has high needs, or just with basic feeding or breastfeeding or whatever it might be. So in most countries, women do get a home visit once they get home. Almost every country except the United States.
Countries north and south of us that happens.
I lost where I am.
We just keep saying that we think we're the leader in the world.
Yeah, we actually are about midway down in maternal mortality. We're just above Cuba and between Romania. We're certainly not at the top.
Papers.
And I'll talk a little bit about some of the things we found in this pilot. So the objective was to complete the planning process for Universal Home Visiting Pilot Project, which we did. So our actions were to develop and finalize protocols for completing the visit, finalizing criteria, secure funding for our gift incentive basket, which kind of fell through on that. The results were that we did develop policies and protocols. We developed some evaluation criteria and tracking tools. And our funding request for the little gift basket that we wanted to give everybody fell through. So no funding for this, but we felt like doing the outreach was good publicity for us and might help increase referrals in the long run. That was when we could build targeted case management for kids who were on Medicaid, which we can't do anymore.
We haven't figured out how to go forward and backwards at the same time yet, but when we do, we'll be back.
Yeah, we're still looking for ways to fund this. So, objective 2 was to implement the pilot program by June 30th, 2018, and we're actually ahead of the game. We actually we conducted the program presentation for stakeholders at community, and another goal was to deliver interventions to at least 75% of families that met the pilot selection criteria, which was women who deliver on Mondays and Tuesdays. Just for the sake of the pilot, we wanted to scale down a little bit. So the results were that we held those presentations in the fall, and hospital visits actually began in December. And we've actually had contact with 100% of eligible women. So we beat our 75% by 25%. So some of the interesting things that have come from that, and I'm almost done here with this first part. So we call it our Welcome Home Baby pilot program. So 48 women were eligible. They have to be Missoula County residents, the baby not in the NICU, and deliver on a Monday or Tuesday. So there were 48 of those between December 15th and March 31st. That's as far as we've gotten with our data. 96% of the eligible women were visited, actual face-to-face. I'm so sorry, these numbers are a little hard to see, but 2 of those 48 we just left flyers for. So they heard about our program, but we didn't visit them face-to-face. For one reason or another, they may have been asleep or out of the room. This is interesting. Normally, one of our forms, and I won't go into too much detail about this, but women have the option when they're registering at the hospital to fill out one of our forms, which allows us to call them after they go home to see how they're doing. We call those the blue sheets. If they don't fill those out, of course, or don't sign them, we don't have authority to call them. So in this case, though, because we visited them at the hospital and they gave us permission to call them, 9 of those 48 we would never have connected with if we hadn't visited them in the hospital because they didn't have a blue sheet. So all 9 of them did accept a hospital visit. 3 actually accepted a home visit. Of those 3, 2 had a home visit completed and 1 actually ended up canceling or declining. So, for the first 2.5 months, I think that's pretty good. We're catching women that we would have missed. Our nurses have actually caught some instances of high blood pressure in women that would have not been seen until their 6-week postpartum visit. So we were able to get them in sooner than they would have otherwise gotten in. And preeclampsia and high blood pressure and stroke can happen postpartum fairly easily. So we've caught 2 of those so far through this program. And like I said, you'll get these slides. They're a little bit hard to read, but they all add up. We made sure. So hospital visit scheduling outcome. If 73% of women accepted our home visit at the hospital. So talking to them at the hospital, 73% said yes. 23% declined any kind of home visit, and then 4% we had no contact. This larger number here, most women wanted us to contact them by phone after they went home rather than schedule a visit right then and there at the hospital. And we understand that they're not in a position to be scheduling appointments when they've just had a baby. But what we did find out, so as home visit outcome, we did complete home visits on 25% so far. So 12 of the 48 women we have done home visits for. 3 of those, 6%, are pending, just haven't happened yet. Of those, 23%, like in the previous slide, had already declined. 19% declined by phone once we called them, even though they had agreed to it earlier. Once we called them, they declined. And then 27% actually did not return our calls. So then we wondered, well, why is that? Why are some accepting more than others? What we found out is that when we actually scheduled a home visit with the women while we were at the hospital, we had a better uptake of the home visit. So 7 or 58% of the women we scheduled at the hospital, and 5 we said that we would schedule by phone.
Is that like an oxytocin effect?
Huh? Yeah.
I mean, really, because it's the day after, right?
Yes.
You're breastfeeding,
Yeah,
you still
within
have oxytocin. So
1 to 2 days.
It's usually a trust effect when you see statistics like that. If they can interact with someone, they're more likely to trust them.
Yeah. So the ones that we did schedule at the hospital, 70%, we actually did get a visit done, and 30% had canceled. So our goal, let's see, if we scheduled by phone, 80% actually declined eventually, and only 20% had a home visit. So this is really good info for us, that we're really going to try to encourage women to make an appointment while we're there at the hospital. And we found out the more dressed up we are, the more they accept a home visit. We're just sort of, we don't have that in our data. But
Right, and we don't dress up necessarily for home visits,
Well, right,
because
we're
we're
trying
staying home,
not
but it's
to.
more culturally acceptable to not dress up on a home visit.
She doesn't want to put makeup on for you to come over there.
Yeah,
She's-
yeah, we don't want to intimidate
Exactly.
too
I
much.
quit wearing rings when I was doing public health because
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
no jewelry.
Yeah.
But when we were at the hospital, it actually made a difference, we noticed. So that was really interesting.
They look more official.
So, yep, it makes you wonder if you would wear a lab coat
I
or
was gonna
some
say,
other
try
kind
to wait
of
on.
indication that you were a professional, that it might make a difference too.
You guys will have to take a trunk of clothes and try different ones in different rooms.
There's something to probably be said too for just, this sounds horrible, but sales training. I think there's a lot that could be said for, you're still trying to sell a service, right? So
Yeah.
fundamental sales training techniques would probably increase the success rate significantly in this case.
That's a good idea. Yeah, I hadn't really thought about
And
that.
I think our nurses, in terms of who gets referred to our nurses to go find the person in the community, get themselves invited in, they clearly have that skill as they get in. And that takes a lot to get in on that first visit.
Definitely does.
But those that weren't already maybe thinking they needed help, I think your point.
I would just assume you guys were all CPS trying to get in, honestly. So I'm not surprised you have a fairly decent turn down rate in a lot of cases, because I would just assume you're trying to come in and figure out what's going on. So dispelling those myths, I know people that are like, oh, public health, that's CPS.
They do mix us up
So,
with CPS.
all the time.
Yeah.
So I think that's something that, if that can be combated as well during the process,
Yeah, that's true.
that could have a huge impact on getting, especially by phone call. If you just called, I would assume you're just trying to come spy on me.
Yep,
So-
that's the whole reason we want to get in and meet them, and they'll fall in love with our lovely nurses. And we do wear our badges, so clearly it says health department, but they even mix up the health department with CPS.
Are you leaving materials with them? when you-
And I'm sorry, I meant to bring those. We have this really cute, colorful flyer that talks about what we can help them with. And it, has our logo, and it just talks about newborn care and feeding, sibling adjustment, partner adjustment, those kinds of things, resource access. So we try to.
I don't know the complications of doing this, but I would be very surprised if a bunch of the faith-based organizations in Missoula didn't want to fund your gift baskets.
Oh, I
Well, I was thinking baby boxes.
Yeah, I mean, I would totally reach out to the faith-based organizations in Missoula,
That's a good idea.
and go from there.
Well, there's a recent University of Montana graduate started the company Baby Box Company, and they're $145. But they come packed with stuff.
They come packed with gifts and clothes and.
Not gifts, just beginning supplies.
Beginning supplies. Very cool. That's a good idea. We can look, we are still trying to pursue that. And in fact, the staff there have asked us, well, can't you just see all the women? When are you going to upscale this? And our contract ends June 30th for this pilot program, so we're hoping to upscale it to every woman.
And to move to St. Pat's. 'cause
And
you
St.
can-
Pat's has asked us too already if we can be involved, so.
That might be a good default into faith-based organizations holding at St. Pat's.
St. Pat's, yeah. That's a really good idea to approach the churches. I mean, we weren't asking for a lot of money. We just wanted to bring a little gift basket.
Well, there's the Missoula Interfaith Collaborative that connects to all of them, so you don't have to go church to
Oh,
church.
that's a really good idea. Yeah. That is an excellent idea. Because we would like to bring a little something, and then we can say that we're going to do that too. Free gift for your lovely nurse to come visit you. So we feel really good about that. We're excited. We want to continue moving forward with that program. So that's that, and then I think the next on the agenda is.
Yeah, next on the agenda would be item 5, approved, which
Oh,
is an
sorry.
action item.
Could I just make
Do you
an
have a
ask,
question?
Vicki? Yeah.
Sure.
Have you
Those
done
bed
any
boxes
outreach
are
about the
just
pilot
plain, though, they say.
yet to
But then you read.
pediatric providers?
I don't think that, actually.
I would suggest getting on the agenda for the pediatric section
That's
at community to start letting people know what you're doing, because
This meets
that-
quarterly meeting.
and we're now meeting monthly. but-
Oh, you are? Oh.
Yeah, not all people are there, but they're, definitely some of the newborn nursery providers are there, and
Great.
I think as, hopefully, this becoming universal, a big part of sort of getting the trust is if the providers that are coming in can say, oh yeah, the health department nurses
They're
can come
gonna
in. I'd
be-
really recommend that you
Yeah.
have them come in and visit you in the next couple of days at home. That also will kind of increase that buy-in.
That's a really good
And
idea.
I suspect that people are going to be supportive.
That's a
I just
great
don't think
suggestion.
most of the newborn nursery providers at this point probably know that you're even doing the pilot.
Yeah, Dr. Fawcett likes us already, but yeah, we should reach out to more of them.
We are gonna have to look at though how we're gonna,
Fund it.
how we're gonna deal with the cuts at the same time we're trying to do this and that, we're not paralyzed by that because we're still finishing the cuts. But I don't think we've figured that out.
Haven't
so.
figured out how to really fully fund
Yes.
this. It used to be that we could, any of those babies that had Medicaid, we could bill for that visit because we normally do baby weights and, you know, newborn care instruction. So those are all Medicaid billable, but no longer.
Well, and then you get in the home and you also find, you know, a toddler who appears to have a delay. You're there for the newborn and here this other child hasn't. So our nurses find a lot of those issues too.
Yeah, we assess, we triage and assess, you know, the whole family situation.
The other thing I might suggest is, I mean, I'm sure it was cleaner just as a pilot to say no NICU at all.
Yeah, we thought we'd include
But,
the NICU.
but there are
NICU is
probably a
huge.
lot of NICU patients that, you know, are short stay, uncomplicated things that this would be hugely beneficial.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, those we tend to get referrals from the social worker before they discharge, but not always. So that's a really good point as well. And just to go in and touch base with them.
Just to say hi would be good.
Mhm, while they're in the NICU and let
Yeah.
them know we're available. Yeah. Thank you.
All right, thanks. So now, I guess we'll move on to item number 5, which again is an action item, which is approve renewal of an application for funding support from the Community Assistance Fund for fiscal year 2019 for the Missoula Foster Child Health Program and authorize board chair or vice chair to sign the completed application. Vicki's going to walk us through that as well.
Yes, thank you. So every year we reapply for the Community Assistance Fund grant to help fund part of our foster child health program. And for the new members of the board, I included this information in the slides. They're very wordy. We'll send these to you as well, so I won't go through them in detail because we're short on time. But this helps fund part of our foster child health nurse who works with foster parents. So normally we work with bio parents, but in this program we're working with the foster parents to make sure that they understand the health needs of their foster children and help them navigate the foster care system as well as the healthcare system. And so each year when we apply for this grant, one of the requirements is that the Board of Health agrees to our application process. So briefly, historically, for the new members, this is a tri-agency collaboration, this program between us, CP, Child and Family Services Division, and Providence's Grant Creek Family Medicine. They have a foster care clinic where all the kiddos go for their initial physicals, comprehensive exam, once they're pulled out of the home and into foster care. Trying to impact the safety of the children as well as help promote Child and Family Services Division staff retention because we really are a good support for them when it comes to the health needs of the children. I'm not going to go through all this, it's long and wordy, but basically we started in 2004 and have kind of grown since then. You can see we initially got a grant in 2004, and then we moved forward with expanding that. In 2012, we received our first funding from the Community Assistance Fund, and that's super helpful. It's been renewed each year since. And then in 2012, we actually entered into a formal agreement with Child and Family Services Division, and they helped support us with a stipend as well on a per child per month basis. So that allowed us to increase our staffing a little bit. We have been recognized. I'm going to talk about this briefly just because I think it's so wonderful. We've been recognized. Well, we're in the strategic plan. We also are we were in Governor Bullock's Protect Montana Kids initiative twice as promising practice and a model that other health departments around the state should try to emulate. We also presented at national and international conferences in 2016. In 2017, we completed a formal evaluation, which I'm going to talk about at the end of this. And with the University of Montana with Bart Klicka. And in November of 2017, we were highlighted as an emerging promising practice by the American Psychological Association, and we're published in their newsletter. That's super exciting. And the evaluation's really good, and that's why, thanks to Dr. Klicka, that happened partly. I'll talk about that later. A little bit about our funding. Like I said, CAF has been very, very helpful. We got some funding from CFSD, which ended in October and then reinstated, which I mentioned earlier. Targeted case management. Now, some of these kids actually do qualify because of their high health needs. We can bill many of these kiddos for targeted case management services. They have to have some pretty severe health problems in order for us to do that. But we did still take a hit in that billing, and we have had to pull out 0.5 PHF from this program. Still trying to suffer through with a 1.0 FTE. Luckily, Judah's used to it because she did it on her own before, but it's difficult to take all the referrals and keep up. In fiscal 17, our average caseload was 58 to 62 foster children, so that now is going to be one nurse managing that. We see all children ages 0 to 5 years. Any foster child experiencing a new placement or a change in placement, because that's when some of these medical records get lost along the way and their healthcare needs get lost along the way. Judith gathers records and makes sure the foster parent and the CPS workers know what the health needs are. And all children age 16 to 18 as they are starting to transition out of care, because that's another vulnerable time for these kiddos. So since the beginning, in 2011, we've served 632 children, 3,000 encounters, in other words, home visits or phone visits. 28% of those were face-to-face, and 120 referrals in FY17. Outcomes, as you can imagine, are improved health, stabilization of these kiddos. It also helps foster parents' retention. Then our evaluation by Bart Klicka was organized by key demographics, which I'll go over. And we did the data analysis on 415 children between November 2011 and June 2016. So these are busy slides, and you'll see, you can look at them on your own. I won't go over them individually here, but basically, believe it or not, there's 50-50 male-female of our 417 kids, and that's the breakdown of years old. 35% of those kids had no primary care provider when they moved into foster care. Almost 60% had no dental home. 33% had already had a mental health problem identified. And then here, this is so interesting. You guys can look at these on your own, but you can see from admit to discharge, however long, it's not even noted here how long they were in care that we were involved or CPS was involved, but the percent of these conditions decreased almost every single one. Same with mental health issues, decrease in most of those. Diagnoses, tantrums. Tantrums didn't decrease. Tantrums increased, no. We actually expected to see more utilization of health care once, and more utilization of Medicaid initially once we got them. But medication types, these we still need to work on. We're trying to subcategorize the other medications into psychotropics, because these really aren't medications, but we were tracking those. But we feel that foster children are probably over-medicated in some ways with psychotropics, just to help them deal with what they've been dealing with in the home.
What's the deal with vitamins there?
What's that? They decrease.
Yeah, why? Are they just giving them too many vitamins? What is, they're eating the whole bottle?
They were chewable.
Probably
My
by
husband loves
age,
them.
probably they're aging, they're getting older.
We'd have to get a
That's
sense
good.
from-
Most kids don't need vitamins.
I need carrots. Yeah.
We'd have to get a sense from Judith what that looks like on the ground.
And their diets are probably better. I don't know, if they're ordered by the physician or not. You know, we're not, foster parent isn't making those decisions. The physicians are making those decisions. And then physical health conditions, again, just by age category. This is also by age category. Medication by age category. So you'll have some time to look at those on your own. So basically, the CAF, I should say CAF, sorry about that. They changed their title. Community Assistance Fund will be released. It is released, and I'm actually currently working on it. It's due May 16th. It does require that the applying agency receives approval for the application from the board, our board. But Board of Health meetings occur actually
Wrong time.
after the application is due. So I'm never fully done with it by the time this board meeting meets. So I'm requesting approval to proceed with the grant application process, and I can review the status with you at the next board meeting if you like.
When do you all award CAF?
In June sometime. Well, it's part of the budget.
I will add that we're
Recommendations will be
working on requesting more money, not more than much more than we originally asked for, but the money has dropped over the years. We recognize that there's a lot of funding that goes out into the community. We may not get that. We're glad the state reinstated their funds, but the net loss to the program because of the Medicaid money still doesn't allow us to make that program a 1.5, as you heard Vicki state. So we're going to reflect that in our statement of need and request. We don't expect the program's going to go away if we don't get an increased amount. We're not looking at bringing all the money that we used to have back in. But usually we just request the same amount, and that used to be about $45,000, and then slowly over the years, as that fund has to help other agencies, that has dropped. So our request will be higher this year. Our budget right now doesn't show us relying on that request coming through higher, but we're hoping. And certainly if it drops, we could get into the critical mass of keeping the program intact. We also need to re-engage. We used to meet quarterly with the partners and check how things were going on, and when everything got thrown into the fan, basically, last year, we lost some of that communication. So we want to re-engage on that front. We can't do it as regularly as we used to. We also have had discussions, preliminary discussions, when we started the program. PHC, for example, didn't have a residency. There's not only an interest in how those two can work together, there's concern on the PHC's front. Similar to the concern we had at the beginning of the program, but is now new with PHC, is that when the clients go there for that one assessment, if they're staying there and not coming back to their provider, if they had a provider, that's not the intent of what's happening. So we're going to look into the data to see if in fact they are leaving their provider, which of course they have a right to do, but we're going to start looking at that. But in the last year, it's been so chaotic with just trying to keep that program on the face of the earth, that those are the kinds of things we have to get reconnected on.
So I don't know if I have this number right. You told me there's a possibility of not making 400 visits. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, it was.
That's when we had full cuts, right? And now.
Yeah, that's actually, I think you may be referring to the Medicaid. We had over 500 unduplicated Medicaid children, and some of those would have been foster. Mm-hmm. And we had, with a nurse and a half on foster, we could get as high as about 100 kids on a caseload at any given time. We can't do that now. But your point, I believe, is we also have to make less visits to some, and it's that intensity and timing of a visit that kind of helps get everybody up to, get the child and the foster parent and the doctor up to speed on that kid's status.
So if you're working with the university and with Partnership Health, is there a way to perhaps transition part of this program into telemedicine and getting people on? I mean, I know it's not the same as being there, but it's better than not doing anything, and it's
Yeah.
better than a phone call because at least you've got a video component, or you can direct them to, I don't know.
So when I talk about visits, I'm not talking about clinic visits. I'm
No, I
talking
know.
about nurse visits that help determine.
I know. But if you
what is the
can't do
status
it,
of the record.
Yeah, but the parents aren't going to necessarily have that capability.
Some might, some possibly.
So basically what we've done is we just regrouped back to our 3 priority hub areas of all the foster kids in Missoula County, and so that's the 3 priority areas. And we're trying to serve them at the same level of intensity. But anyone who didn't fit in those priority areas, we're not turning them away, but we're trying to do a little triage and coordination. And we're still kind of feeling our way on that.
Like the 5 to 10-year-olds, you know, the school-age kiddos, we'll visit once, and then basically all we can do now is tell the foster parent if they have a question or problem to give us a call. So we're always available, but we're not doing as many routine visits with that age group.
Right.
That was the one area we needed to cut back a little bit. The 0 to 1, the babies are the most at risk, you know, for health needs. But so we're still seeing that middle school age.
But I
group.
think that might have been what I was referring to, is that level of number of visits for that population is down. And I don't have a quantitative data on that right now.
We could get that. Yeah, we're looking for all kinds of ways. Well, telemedicine we could probably do with the provider more easily, the providers.
So at this point, we're looking for a motion to approve the renewal and application for funding, so that Vicki can give it
With increased, we're going to put an increase. Well, we put the same request in every year, we just
We
step
do.
over.
It's just
But I
that
think we're going a little higher this year so we can delineate the need. And then, of course, we recognize that those that make the decision will make the decision.
So I move that we approve the application for renewal.
Okay, any further comment or discussion on the motion now that we've got it on the floor? Any public comment or discussion, public comments or questions on the motion on the floor? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
So moved. All right, well, thank you, Vicki. With
you.
that, we, I think we have the general reports. I think water quality, this is the
Yeah, they're going to
So I think this is all right. So-
I can go super fast, although I find what I did really interesting, mainly to stress out Julie over there, but.
you did not.
Oh, of course I did.
How did you pick
I
that?
apologize in advance.
No. So most of what I do is threat and kind of forward-looking assessments.
James Stevens.
And so instead of doing this like a traditional kind of thing, I actually compiled a bunch of papers together and kind of organized those links so we could go through this series. But so my field of expertise is really innovation, and that's what I work on. And so what I wanted to do is go through innovation, cultural changes in public health, looking at societal technological changes, biotechnological changes, and cyber-technological changes. The last one's to embarrass Julie, but
So if you're going to use this view, I didn't want to interrupt.
Oh, I can go all
Can
the-
you make it bigger?
yeah, I don't think, is this button?
Yeah.
Actually, there's.
If you.
That one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
There, thank you.
Did you present this at the White House?
Yeah. So, or a version. So really there's 3 major things we're looking at when we're looking at innovation and its impact on public health. Most of them I knew nothing about. So the biggest one that I looked at was actually what's called societal technological changes. And that's really any interface between society and technology. And if you're not in the current dating world, you'd have no idea what any of this stuff is. But really, there's 2 major things that are affecting public health in the dating world, and that's Tinder and Grindr. So Tinder is what they call sex-on-demand app for heterosexual couples, normally, and then Grindr is for homosexual couples from that aspect. And there's an entire industry that's now defined as the sex-on-demand industry, which influences society quite a bit. However,
Huge weight.
this has caused two different things. There's a negative side of it, and there's a public side of it with the cultural changes. So there's a positive thing, and the one that my son thinks is the funniest thing is, what are some positive things that happen with this? And so there's been some societal changes, and the biggest one that I think is humorous, and my son thinks is super humorous, is there appears to be evidence that pubic lice is going extinct. And the statement is from a lack of habitat due to cultural changes. And so it's only presenting itself in
Killing me.
atypical populations, and there's the link. So we'll send this to everybody. But they actually have links to all the NCBI studies for all this stuff from there. And then the other one after that is because of open access to the internet, sex education has decreased greatly in America. I had no idea until I started putting this presentation together for you guys from there. But it appears to be open access to information is actually allowing teens and young adults to circumvent restrictive educational practices in rural communities. It's both good and bad. There's definitely positive and negative applications from that aspect as opposed to abstinence only. But I think you could argue that open education and more education is probably beneficial. Probably needs to be controlled because I think those kids that are in that picture are way too young to be looking that kind of stuff up. But that's my own personal opinion on it. However, there's a negative trend to this. And really, there's two major negative trends to what's called societal technological innovation. One is the death of the expert. No one believes they're doctors anymore. They believe that whoever knows more than that. The other one after this is because of these apps, it appears that STDs are at the worst rates ever recorded in the history of the United States, ever. And they pretty much, there's correlation that online dating apps are probably the cause of this. And the most fascinating one is they think Craigslist is almost exclusively responsible for the delivery of HIV into small rural communities across the country because people could kind of acquire sex on demand, which is really interesting and really impactful. Okay, what does this have to do with public health? I think really the thing that we have to see is what are the unforeseen consequences on public health from society, socio-technology. I was joking about STDs and all that, and there's a billboard on the interstate that says, hey, did your swipe right go wrong? Come to this clinic. I just saw that billboard today and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm talking about this already. This is kind of funny. Really what it went to me is, do technology companies and do innovators have a responsibility to support their unforeseen circumstances? And so really what I was looking at is, do communities need to start enforcing effectively a Craigslist or a Tinder tax? If they're increasing STDs and they're increasing, threats on public health in the community, is it the responsibility of these different applications and these different new innovations to actually fund that application? Currently, how society works in the US is no. However, in Europe, they're contemplating making it so if you do anything that impacts society or increases costs, your business or application pays for it. And so really what I wanted to do and kind of throw this first phase out and talk really fastly on is, how does public health partner with innovators? How do we work out with these groups to really mitigate their impact on society and what they're doing? And I really think preemptive participation is probably really important compared to regulation from that. But I would not be shocked to start seeing that change to do that. And there's discussion now over communities being able to regulate their geospatial space, even in cyberspace. So if you think about it, Tinder's based on location. So you get on your app and it tells you whoever is looking for somebody else within 4 miles. Well, in all reality, because it's location-based, it's no different than a pub or a bar or whatever. Does that give local community health? Does that give local public health? Regulatory, are they gonna have to start passing rules and regulations that allows them to control what occurs within their geographic border? So, that being the first one I found most interesting because I knew nothing about it until I started looking into it and found all sorts of links that I'm like, those are not suitable for work to read about, but it was a lot of information, and I think the previous thing, these links, especially the link on where STDs are in America, this is going to be a big deal, and this is going to continue to have more and more negative public health effects even in our community. And there's probably, although correlation is not causation, there's pretty good correlation between app use and app use rates for its impact on sexual health in communities. So I think it's an important thing to think about, and one of the things that my guess is public health doesn't routinely think about, how a new app on an app store can all of a sudden radically change what's occurring in a community. I think we have to start thinking about this stuff.
There's precedence for this on the criminal front already with sex trafficking. The Backpage was recently shut down.
Craigslist Personal shut down.
Craigslist Personal's a shutdown. And the crimes that were being propagated on Backpage they're now implicating the hotels, and the hotel chains are being, there's causation there. And so they're implicated in lawsuits. Those are federal crimes. Obviously, we're not going to charge someone with an STD, but it'd be easy to take IPs and geotags and overlay.
People who know they're infected, though, if they spread it intentionally, they can be charged. And
Yeah.
there's been cases of that when it comes to HIV and stuff. So,
Right.
very interesting. Leads to all sorts of odd conversations, but I thought it was all fascinating. I wanted to include all these links for you guys so you can kind of read these at your leisure or whatever, because some of them are interesting. After that, I looked at biotechnology. This is my realm. Biotechnology is defined as the exploitation of biological process for industrial stuff. This is the space I work in. I think what's most interesting, though, is there's a movement called biohacking that's propped up, and people are doing effectively unauthorized genetic experimentation on themselves from this aspect. So this is an individual who runs a company and did an illegal herpes vaccine and dropped his pants on stage at a conference and injected himself. No testing, no anything. So why is that really a concern besides the obvious things from there? There's 3 major governmental risks to this whole thing. The first one's bioterrorism. The second one's genetic damage. Someone who injects themselves with an unregulated vaccine may damage their germlines, which means they might damage their actual offspring and offspring downstream from them, which is kind of interesting. And then there's also this kind of proliferation of controlled materials. This technology can be used to generate drugs, hormones, chemical precursors, all sorts of things from there. Why is this all important now? It's because a new technology called CRISPR has come out recently, which has reduced the cost of setting up a biotechnology lab. The last line on here, it costs less than $10,000 to set up a genetic lab that can do all the things that are talked about above. So there's 2 articles on how to do the complete biosynthesis of opioid and brewer's yeast. That means a brewer in a $10,000 lab can start producing heroin in our community, right? After that, you look at gene doping and performance enhancing for things. People take steroids for performance improvements in high school sports. What's to stop them from starting doing gene doping and trying to increase human growth hormone or all that kind of stuff from this aspect? And then the third one that I find most interesting because it's most disturbing is what if someone starts producing different behavioral hormones, puts those in something like brewer's yeast or lactobacillus in yogurt, and you eat it, and you get an uptick in expression of oxytocin or testosterone. You can increase aggression, you can make people passive, you can do all sorts of tactics which change behavior on a biological level. All for $10,000, right? So when you start looking at public health, does public health have any idea how many labs are doing biotechnology work in Missoula, Montana right now? I couldn't find a list of it.
We don't even know how many meth labs there are, much less this.
To be fair, but the point is there's really no regulation or even no discussion, even on a private innovator level, of what's going on and what are you doing, right? So how would the community even know if something risky is being done in a garage lab, even if it's behind the kind of guise of a legitimate company?
Puts a new meaning behind
It's like
cottage
a whole new
industries.
era of patent medicine, it takes you back to early 1900s. People that could concoct things, but they can concoct them in a different way now.
Mm-hmm. I think the big one from our aspect, from public health perspective, is again, I think it goes back to the production of, my biggest concern is why does it matter? I think it's high-tech snake oil. I think that's the biggest thing from a perspective of public health is who's peddling what thing, what are they doing their claims. I know the FDA is supposed to be involved in all sorts of stuff, but it's pretty, if it's a nutraceutical, they're not involved. If you claim it has certain activity, they're involved. So I think that's the real risk I see is this kind of high-tech homeopathy or snake oil salesman. Environmental, I think the big concern would be a release of genetically modified organisms or whatever that people don't know what's occurring into the space. And then there's always the economic impact. If someone cooks up a pathogen that wipes out wheat Montana's, wheat crops or whatever, there could be economic damage to forestry, agriculture, food production, whatever from that aspect. I think from our end, we just need to pay attention to more high-tech homeopathy. Oh, I can cure your HIV, I can cure your whatever that you have. It occurs all over the world, but I think that's my biggest concern from our aspect. And then, there's a bunch of reference links on here so you guys can kind of see all that as well too. So here's all sorts of stuff about why biohacking is a problem. Here's DIY, here's all the warnings, here's technology, yada, yada, yada. CRISPR-Cas9, that's how it works.
Yeah.
You splice DNA. It's really cheap to do now. And then my last one is cyber technology. And this is the one that it started out as a joke, mainly to stress Julie out. But in reality, I think there's a real thing to this. And so cyber technology is any kind of computer technology out there with internet and cyberspace. You're like, okay, why does this really matter? You know, artificial intelligence and machine learning is where this sits. And I know Julie's going to ask, okay,
This
what is
stresses me out, not because I have this, because he's talking about it.
Yeah.
Just heads up.
So what does this have to do with public health? How does cyber technology go to public health? Well, you know, how are you going to regulate a robotic brothel? Right? From a public health perspective. You're like, you're insane, don't talk about this, this is weird. You know what? There's a full robotic brothel set up in Germany that's looking for worldwide investors. Right? In Shanghai, someone set up a robotic, effectively Uber version of a robotic brothel to deliver a doll to you that you could rent and it comes back and go through that whole thing. It got banned within 4 days as vulgar in China, so to be fair, they shut it down pretty quick. But really, how do you set community standards for this whole new thing? Right? That's a real doll. Right? That looks fairly human-esque, you know, from those aspects. So what do you do about this? I mean, do you ban it? Do you create rules? Do you treat it like food service? How do you set up HACCP plans for this? How do you set up regulatory things? You might not want to think about it, but public health has to start thinking about this. And I'd like to say this is 100 years away. There's a robotic brothel in Germany now. Right? They've already gone that way. And then how does that fit in with community standards? Is it prostitution if it's a robot? You know, what are the other things that get programmed? There's all sorts of crazy stuff there. It's a bizarre world. Don't look too much into it if you don't want to know. However, this is a pretty funny video. I don't have it set to play, but you can click
Yeah, I
it.
saw him got turned down.
Yeah. So Will Smith does online dating with a robot, and he gets turned down by the robot. It's kind of funny. So I got the links, and we do the thing around there. I thought that was kind of funny. But really what it comes down to is, and I don't necessarily buy into the singularity, but I like the whole thing. Pace of innovation is outstripping human intelligence. And so I think public health's thing, law and ethics, we cannot keep pace with technology. However, to keep our communities safe and healthy, public health has to keep pace with technology. And so when you start looking at all the different areas that public health does, how does public health get the experts into the space to even understand what they need to start regulating? That was a lot of information, really quick. I talk really fast, I totally understand. However, I wanted to dump a lot of information and kind of get it so this presentation can go out, so things can start being thought about. My bigger concern is the rise of STDs with dating apps. I think that's something that public health in Missoula County needs to start figuring out, what does this mean, and is there anything we can do, whether it's education-based, whether it's partner-based, whatever. That's where I think the real focus
You
needs
intrigued
to
me on
be.
everything else, but you really caught me on that particular point, because we really should be, I mean, we're behind the curve, I'm sure, but we really should be using those apps and our data in some way that we aren't. You know, I mean, we use the apps that are old now to find people that we otherwise couldn't have found before. I don't forget what they're called, Spokio or whatever.
Mhm.
We use that, but to really look at patterns and those types of things, we aren't using that. And we have some folks on our infectious disease staff that I without them even being here, I could tell you would love to learn more about how to take that first step.
I don't know how you get the back end data. That's
Well, the other is to buy ads on there. I mean, I'm guessing you can buy ad like you could on Facebook or something.
So the only one I have is Tinder for Business. It's called Shaper. It's like a business networking one that I use. That's kind of funny because they had an ad that said, want to swipe left or right but not get in trouble with your spouse. So that's why I downloaded the app, because the ad made me laugh. But nonetheless, you know, from that aspect, I think figuring out how to integrate into that and learn that is going to be important, because, I mean, the CDC pretty much says this is probably the sex on demand industry is probably the cause of rise of STDs in current society. And it's at the highest level of it, which I had no idea.
I mean, we're seeing syphilis again. We had to like restudy syphilis because I haven't done that for 30 years.
Usually you have time to study trends.
Yeah.
There's no time,
No.
because
But
it's
plus-
happening, and it's happening so fast, and it's multiplying so fast.
Well, plus my aversion to it all doesn't help me, you know, approach it.
I'm with you.
Whereas where I think the younger staff could really, you know, help us in that weekend.
I mean, I literally did start looking into this just to stress Julie out, and it actually became a point where I was like, this is important. I was just joking. And then when I looked at it to kind of get some
Yeah,
evidence to
that's
stress her out even more.
Well, yeah, he was talking about robots. Is it a device? You regulate it like a device, or is it a
We've
person?
had enough trouble with vaping.
Well, right. And so he started talking about that, and I was getting horrified. He's like, this is actually a problem. This is actually something. Can you imagine if there's like one in a community, and it just
Gets reused.
There's business plans to have it in an automated car, to where the automated car rolls up and it just walks out and comes into your house. So you can just dial up your app and dial a date, and it comes in. But is it clean? Did someone sanitize it?
Yeah.
You know, what are the community standards? It's, I cannot disagree, but
With that, I think we'll.
you
We're
can.
bumping up, but I've got a hard stop at 3 o'clock, so.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank
go.
you.
Thank-
So next we'll move on to who wants to follow that up with next month.
No, we got both our new board members. We're back to
Yeah, they paid their dues.
When's the next meeting?
May 17th,
I haven't done one in about a year. I'd be
May
glad to
15th,
find something.
19th.
Thanks all here.
19th.
We're done.
Okay, then with that, we're gonna move on to reviewing the Board of Health self-evaluation. Is that gonna take a lot of time?
Now, I just want to, if you've looked it over, if there's anything you want to change about how you run your board meetings or directions to staff based on the comments made, this is the time to say things.
I liked the comment about maybe having guidelines for picking things that we would like to learn about. I don't know how everybody else feels about that, but, to do these little review things. So I thought that was a good point.
You mean for the journal reports?
For the journal reports, yep.
I don't know if anybody wants to speak to that comment. It's always been pretty wide open and a lot of fun, but it doesn't mean we can't infuse, go out and seek particular topics. Is that the point of that?
Yeah, this is something that we actually, you do always have to think about out-of-the-box things as well, but it's something that might be applicable to what we're looking at and stuff.
It's not a bad idea,
Comments.
I just don't have any ideas how to do it.
And we could throw in, people could just write out a list of things that they think they'd like to know about. And everybody will have something kind of different, and so we
I'd be
could
glad
maybe.
to follow up on that. If you just all emailed me, if you had a short list of topics that you think, again, not cutting off other interesting topics from our background, but you think you'd like to make sure that we get it, and then that might help presenters choose. Well, I might choose one off the list because I know everybody wants to learn it. And then we can shoot that list back to you next time we get a sign up for a journal report. Or if you get your topics to me soon enough, it might be one that I'd be willing to research.
I was just going to say that it was really serendipitous that Dr. Stanger gave his presentation on vaping right before we
Right
talked
before
about the
that.
smoking ordinance. And it was really useful to me to have sat through that and then have to help the health department go through that issue with the ordinance. So to the extent that there's things that are coming that we're really struggling with on a policy level, it might be useful to let the board know that we'd all like to learn about that from an expert
That's a good
perspective.
point. That's a good way to.
that helped me a lot too when I wrote my support letter, because then I could look
Oh,
up,
yeah.
when I could look up a bunch of other stuff real quick and provide all that information, kind of consolidate it down for kind of an opinion letter or whatever. That was super helpful for the smoking one, the vaping one.
So I would request that people that have a few topics on their mind like that, please email me before, like a week before the next meeting. And then we will share that list with you, and we can go from whatever your background interest topic is, because they're always fun, to making sure that we do cover some other topics.
I did send mine early enough, so you could have detailed it if you
No,
wanted to.
No, and that wasn't a comment about that.
No, I just was laughing. But
I thought it
I
was
I
great.
also really enjoyed learning about somewhat random things, like your trip was amazing to learn about with your presentation, and I don't think you would get that kind of interesting
No.
spontaneity and knowledge.
We definitely want random at least every other meeting, I think. We want to get rid of that. That tradition is just too fun. Because we've had, like this, we've had Garen come in and light things on fire, and I mean, it's just fun. But
I decided to be somewhat serious, but lighthearted for the first time. Get my stuff on fire if we need, but
Please don't set yourself on fire.
for the first time.
All right, well, with that, we'll move on to director's report.
I don't think I have anything to add right now, so we'll just move right onto your agenda.
All right, well then, we're at public comments on items not on the agenda. Board or staff comments on items not on the agenda.
I just have one.
Yeah.
So a public health issue in Bonner right now is noise. So I just wanted to let you know that I toured the,
Bitcoin.
I was going to say Fitbit.
Bitcoin.
It was because I wore my Fitbit and the damn thing lied because I climbed all the way to the roof and it said I did 6 flights up and down, and it's like, no, it's at least 12. So the county has a new energy sustainability coordinator, and then this gentleman, so she and I met this gentleman that works for DEQ out there. He's not in the regulatory end, he's in the energy end. Of course, we had to sign non-disclosures, but the sound is, I don't know how anybody works in there. But we actually did go to the roof to see where they have replaced some of the fans, and you could tell such a difference by the fans that had been replaced and the ones that hadn't. So I'm hopeful that that will help a lot. And then they have some folks helping them with their expansion as to how they will do sound different. And part of it comes from, you think, oh, you get a big building, that's a good thing. It's not really, because if you think about, because what they're doing is putting out heat. And so the heat can't just be directed out, or it's not directed out. So it's just kind of, they didn't while we were there, but they've thrown a smoke bomb so you can see it's just kind of like hanging out. So that's why they have to have so many fans. From the whole discussion though, I mean, when you look at how much energy they use there, and they have put in for more energy, so Missoula County is actually, and we have some interest from some other entities to do server farm things in container cars, which sounds kind of weird, but it's probably easier to get the heat out of them. Eastern Washington has a huge influx of them happening, and so we're looking at whether or not we can do an overlay of zoning on Missoula County so that at least we have some say. We also need to be looking at, is this the best way to use up Montana's cheap energy? Because if they end up using all our cheap energy, then what are we going to do? So it's a big thing.
I kind of have a concern from the heat island effect too, having been around huge amounts of servers and stuff. If they're trying to dump those servers out of the building, where's that heat going? And how's that going to affect us during smoke events, during inversion events, all that kind of stuff? I know it may seem small if there's a lot, but if there's a huge amount of those servers here dumping huge amounts of energy, kicking it out the building, is that going to have other unforeseen environmental or quality of life impacts on the region? So that'd be something that probably needs to be studied from that aspect. I know Google goes so far as to put their stuff on barges out in the ocean to get the heat sinks down because they get so hot.
I'd like to pump the heat in and break up our versions.
So, but
It's a lot.
I think there's more than just sound or whatever. I think there's a huge other
Right, there's
other
sound,
impacts.
there's energy, yeah.
Well, we're using that energy. It does put out a lot of heat, and if it's doing that in the winter, is there a way to somehow?
Not out of that big building, there's not. But, yeah. So.
Probably not.
It was, I mean, the reason that the gentleman from DEQ joined us is the State Department, the state of Montana uses what's called a Kyoto wheel to take the heat out of their server rooms, but that guy had never seen anything like this. I mean, there are a lot of servers in there. And the heat, you can just feel it, and they pull in air from outside in these monster fans to bring cool air in, and they're just blowing it all around in there. But those stairs are a long ways up. 65 feet tall.
There's 4 more of those things going in between Anaconda and
Right.
Butte.
I mean, it's one of those unanticipated things happening in the economy
Yeah.
that nobody thought about, because the sound, if you just regulate sound, the decibels aren't necessarily most of the time bumping up against what you'd normally say for a sound ordinance. But it's the pitch and it's the continuousness of it.
Well, some people are more sensitive than others. I can hear the hum of the fluorescent lights. Not
Uh-huh.
everyone can do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, once someone says it, you can hear it. I think it's 60 hertz or 55 or whatever.
Drives me nuts.
So,
Right, and they affect all people different. I was laughing saying it seemed like mostly women were complaining about the sound out there because
Well, you can-
men don't hear that.
You can
honey.
feel it.
Yeah, yeah. That, yeah. Some lady claimed her dog was losing its hair. I'm not sure if that's true, but anyway, I just
I'd like to
thought
see
I'd
the
report.
paper on that.
Do what?
I'd like to see the support paper on that dog.
The dog losing its hair.
Dogs can lose their hair by being stressed.
Yeah,
True.
yeah,
Any
So-
other,
That's it.
sorry, didn't mean to.
yeah.
Any other board or staff comments and items not on the agenda? Okay, with that, we will adjourn as the Board of Health and convene probably fairly quickly as the Water Quality District Board. I see Travis is here, so you could give us an update on the Water Quality Advisory Council.
Sure, we had 3 items at the last meeting. The first was an application that the district put in on behalf of the city for a second phase of stormwater treatment at Caris Park. It was a planning grant, and that was approved to design an infiltration system for the treated water that is coming out of the Caris Park outfall at Brennan's Wave. So Morrison Merrily is working on the designs for that now, in anticipation of a project implementation grant in May. And so the advisory council was supportive of that and is writing a letter to that effect, or has written and submitted a letter of support for that, that implementation grant. The second thing, and these were both presented by Molly Davidson with Morrison Merrily. The second item was Max Wave, which is proposed kind of on the Clark Fork behind Imagination and Fresh Market. So this would take the existing grade and break it up into a couple of whitewater features. At the same time, it would improve the banks in terms of riparian health, remove some concrete debris, riprap, and improve the intake for the Orchard Homes ditch. Not Orchard Homes, I'm sorry, the Flynn Lowney ditch. Yeah. So the problem is, they have modeled fish passage velocities and have, it appears they've adopted a design to mitigate the fish passage velocities, but at the same time, it is disturbing a river channel, and there was some thoughts from some council members and the public that there's going to be some biological harm done. There was not consensus within the county or the council whether or not to support the project. The public comment period has just opened for the Corps of Engineers permit. This will involve multiple permitting agencies, and the Max Wave Board has been working on this for a long time. It's not to say that some of these issues might not get resolved and the council may recommend some sort of position, but right now it's kind of debatable of whether or not it affects water quality too. So yeah, for all those reasons, there was no consensus on that topic. There's also some concern that the urban character of the river has not received a community visioning, so to speak, of do we want the river corridor to be kind of a whitewater park, so to speak, or is that a good thing? This project would add public access to the river and ADA access to the river too. Those are good things, but again, there was some concern that our community hasn't done visioning for what we want the river corridor to look like. I think the goal was to go through some permitting process first before, they've got some committed donors, but wanted to see that the permits were in hand before actually some money. So this is a combination project with MRA supporting, City Parks and Recreation supporting, and then the Maxway Board. Another concern was just ongoing maintenance. You know, was there going to be a need to come in after high flow events to reestablish these structures?
Like they have at Brennan's.
Right. The difference here was these would be grout-free structures, so relying on just huge boulders.
I've seen them move in water.
Yeah.
Boulders.
Yeah, they do. They do. Water's strong. The third topic was Community and Planning Services is working on a Missoula mapping project to guide future development and utilities, infrastructure, and they're looking for community input about where there's problems. And this is really a good, I think, a good spot for environmental health and water quality advisory council board to chime in, because you can identify places where we know there's issues, where there's high groundwater, elevated nitrates, that sort of thing that could inform how the county plans for infrastructure. So
They have an interactive map you can go on.
yep, it's it's really pretty easy. You just kind of, it's Missoula mapping project, I believe, is, you can just Google that, and you can just add an icon where there's a transportation issue or an environmental issue or whatnot. It's very simple. So the next meeting, we will have Keith Large and Sarah Sparks coming to talk about the dumps, some more technical information about the dumps. So if anybody would be interested in attending that, it'll be May 8th.
Great. Thanks, Travis.
Yeah.
With that, any public comments on items not on the agenda? Any board or staff comments on items not on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll adjourn as the
Don't
water.
we need to approve?
No.
Oh,
we
were there
don't-
no water?
We don't
Oh,
have
it was just
minutes.
air minutes, sorry.
They're on the agenda, but we don't have them.
Okay.
So, with that, we'll adjourn as the Water Quality District Board and convene as the Air Pollution Control Board. And I think that's the only board that we do have
Yep.
minutes from. It looks like we've got minutes both from March
And last summer.
An
and
old
from
set
July
from July of
27th.
last year. And
Yeah.
then the March minutes.
So, July happened when Garen was still here.
Yeah.
I think we should send Garen and Teresa copies of
I
the
think,
minutes to
yeah, I think it's his job.
give their proxy approval.
I would move that we approve both sets.
Any board or staff discussion on that motion? Any public comments on the motion to approve the minutes? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Hi.
All right, with that, Deb's not here to walk us through the TPCC.
I was there, though.
Okay.
It was a short meeting. We did 2 minor amendments to the work plan, one of which is to have staff start to look at new technology like driverless cars. Speaking of apps and things today, so it should be, yeah. So it should be interesting, but other than that, there wasn't much on the agenda.
Poor Ross.
I just don't know who would ever trust a robot.
Either way, right?
You would think that
I
if
got
you're.
Could get hurt.
Will Smith.
I wasn't thinking that so much. I was just thinking, broadcast out to the world in.
Yeah, how do you
in
know
any
she's
kind
on
of-
video? Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like, it seems like a bad idea from a lot of fronts.
I'm going to tell you, don't delve too deep into it.
No,
Unless you
I
have a really
won't,
thick
no.
stomach,
No,
strong
I-
stomach. Yeah.
I've had enough already. So, anyways, okay, with that, public comments on items not on the agenda for the air meeting. Board or staff comments on items not on the
We got an F. We got an F for our air quality.
Oh.
Yeah, we get one every year.
Yeah, but we should
get
say,
one.
yeah, F for fire.
We get one every year.
Wood smoke,
We get
though.
newspaper articles on it every year and emails. I've got some to follow up on. It's the particulate
Cannot control
pollution.
it.
Oh, sure it
Yeah.
is. It's the
Mhm.
fires this summer.
It's fires every summer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
There was no air quality council meeting this month.
This-
so I
yeah,
think
it was
it's on the
canceled.
agenda.
Okay. Yeah. All righty.
Hey, we did it.
Well, with that, we'll adjourn as the Air Pollution Control Board and adjourn as all of our boards.
Okay.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody.
Yeah.